I'm Stuart.
I'm Mickey.
And we're going to be making a Warhammer Underworld tier list for the Nemesis format. Before we go further, we should sort of quickly define what sort of brackets we're looking for. Obviously, your S tier warbands are absolutely fantastic. In the hands of anyone who just understands the basic rules of the game, you're probably going to do incredibly well with them. Quite easy to win a tournament with them if you know what you're doing, and if you're a skilled player, extremely likely to place very highly, I would say. Then you've got your A tiers, who are just really solid warbands that either have bad matchups or just aren't quite perhaps as overpowered and don't make the cut for S tier, but are still really good picks. As long as you know what you're doing with them, you will almost always do well. B tier warbands are your kind of average good warbands, who again will probably suffer from some bad matchups that pull them down, or just not quite being as overtuned as the ones in S and A tier. C tier are the ones that are struggling, need a bit of help. You'll definitely still be able to see people who know what they're doing do really well with these warbands, but overall, if you're not super experienced with them, you're probably not going to do that well, truth be told. D tier is where, even if you know what you're doing, you're going to struggle to do well. These are the real bad kind of problem children warbands who have become underpowered or always underpowered. And obviously F tier is just the zone for the absolute nadir, unfortunately, warbands that are in dire need of assistance and probably aren't going to be able to win even with the best people piloting them. Obviously, people's mileage will vary. There are some people who just have devoted their lives to a single warband and have mastered them, and I'm sure will quibble about wherever we place them on this tier list. And it's worth noting it's a Nemesis tier list. We will talk about different deck pairings, but there are definitely some warbands who are much stronger or much weaker in Nemesis than they would be in the more free-form championship format, where they can pick and choose whatever cards they want. Because if you're saddled with a weak faction objective deck, it's going to drag you back, even if your fighters and your special rules are just fantastic. So, we'll start with Black Powder's Buccaneers, which means, unfortunately, we are starting right at the bottom, in my opinion. They were pretty infamous when they came out for being weak, even before we factor in Nemesis. Now, we should take a second to appreciate that the Nemesis deck, Beastbound Assault, is really good for them. Absolutely. It synergizes with their deck, it has some nice passives they can score off, but it also still incentivizes them to put their little flimsy fighters on tokens in enemy territory. And obviously, Black Powder himself is a big, tough piece that can handle it. And the monkey and the parrot, more so the monkey because he can actually take objectives, in theory they've got the defense to survive it, but I've learned the hard way that isn't always the case.
But in terms of their profiles, they do have the defense there. Like 3 dodge defense isn't to be sniffed at. And when you say we're starting right at the bottom, like, I'm thinking this is low D tier.
To be fair, you're probably right, actually. Yeah. And that's entirely down to Beastbound Assault. Without that, I don't think there's another pairing that really works. You'd probably give them Fearsome Fortress, but
I think it's also down to Black Powder himself, in that sort of, even though sort of there's a lot of bad stuff here, he still has 6 wounds, is tough to take down, and you're going to have to sink a bunch of activations into it. So sort of, I think that keeps him from sort of, the ogre by themselves sort of keeps it a little bit higher, and then 2 people who can defend.
And we mustn't, of course, forget Pegs and KG, who are also here.
In D tier.
Yeah. No, I agree.
After that, we have Dreppa's Wraith Creepers.
Your favourite.
I have never won against Dreppa's Wraith Creepers. They have just walked all over me as a couple of different warbands. They are one that I think we're going right up to the A tier on. They have an obvious weakness to anything with Ensnare, but sort of they basically point them forwards and fire them off, sort of shoot. They charge forwards, they push forwards, they inspire like nobody's business. Tooth and Claw is just so obviously the way to go. You could do Toxic Terrors, sort of, I guess you could go for objectives if you wanted, but Tooth and Claw is right there. And yeah, it's just sort of a really easy, simple, and sort of, if you're learning the rules of the game, they are just so simple and like, this is how you attack and kill things.
See, I don't fully agree with you on them. First of all, I think Toxic Terrors is probably about as good as Tooth and Claw because it's a bit more focused on just being in enemy territory and less easy to deny. So Tooth and Claw's got cards like Hurricane Force, which can give you a big reward for the enemy territory, but you can deny it more easily. Where you've got like things like the Surge in Toxic Terrors for being in territory. I don't think either's necessarily better than the other. It depends what you kind of want, because either way, you're mostly taking their very, very focused faction deck with its extremely powerful Surges. I have beaten them, so I don't think they're quite as powerful as you are. They can be defeated with a bit of luck, with a lot of ping. There are ways.
I think that's why it's A tier, because they are beatable, and sort of they have things that they are poor against. But overall, sticking against your average warband, and they are going to be slicing through them. They've got cleave and they have ensnare. Sort of, are you all block? Are you all dodge? Are you a mix? They have a tool for that.
But you can knock out the 3-win fighters if you're quick and careful. Granted, you have to be able to do 3 damage or have the backup damage and pings to do it. I think they're top of B. I don't think they're bottom of A. But we'll have to make a call on this.
I absolutely think they're A tier.
We'll put them in A for now and maybe we'll come back to them. We'll see. But we'll go from a strong warband we have disagreements on to one that is probably neither of these things, unfortunately, with the Godsworn Hunt, who are, bless them, not the strongest and are definitely looking at the bottom here. They've got an annoying Inspire condition that it requires you to put upgrades on them, which means you have to already be doing okay to Inspire. Most of them aren't that impressive. Obviously, they've got a 3-wound fighter in there, but they're mostly not good. Their faction deck has the Oath mechanic, which, while very fun, is not that well realised, with loads of cards that are easy to counterplay when you know what's coming. A lot of them are third end phase, and they have like only 2 faction surges because they're one of the warbands before they made complete rivals decks. So you're using so little faction deck and you're forced to go quite heavily into whatever deck you take.
The deck you obviously want to take is Illusionary Might. But no, that doesn't count for their Inspire condition.
Yeah, Illusionary Might, of course, the illusions will not help you Inspire, so it's maybe not a good pick. I mean, it does give you lots of nice sort of weapon upgrades, which helps with their damage. I think there's actually a weird argument to make for Seismic Shock, because you've got a wizard, and I think her name's Thedra, their wizard, and they've got a lot of just bodies to get in the way and to take tokens. I don't know if it's good, but I think in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing and is looking for a challenge or wants to take on like less experienced players but still have fun, they might have an utility there. D tier.
Oh, I was thinking F.
I think D for now. You got the last one, I get this one, but they're definitely going bottom of D for now.
And then we have our other Dark Oath, which are the Null Spirit pack. Really difficult to find something to pair them with. Just who knows where you go with them. But I suppose you could try Tooth and Claw. But no, they came out with Tooth and Claw. It was absolutely made for them. And you could do Toxic Terrors, but Tooth and Claw, sort of, why wouldn't you? Take Null Spirit Tooth and Claw to a tournament and watch people groan.
Yeah.
It is just extremely powerful and is a deck that is banned in Championship because it has 6 restricted cards.
I didn't even know that, yeah.
Rivals deck has 1 and Tooth and Claw has 3. And Tooth and Claw has 3 restricted. Yeah. So it gives you 6 restricted cards, which is... Yeah,
it's a horrific pairing, and they can probably do okay if you, for some reason, want to make it harder for yourself or try to go easier on people but still want to use them. They could definitely make use of Daring Delvers, Fearsome Fortress, Toxic Terrors for sure. Fundamentally, they've got a really strong faction deck and really strong fighters. Every possible niche they have covered. You've got a fighter with innate scything from the get-go. You've got...
Not anymore, because of the beta rules.
That's true. We'll come back to that. But you've got a fighter with Scything, you've got a fighter with 3 damage, which is more powerful than Nemesis, because there are fewer cards that boost damage than there are in Championship. And you've got 2 range 3 fighters. You're right, the beta rule has weakened them, and I think may mean they're not the top dog, but S tier. They're S tier.
No question.
They certainly can be beaten. Like, they don't have a huge amount of health, but they are very strong. Next, we have the Cunning Crew. And I think this is going to be one of our sort of more controversial or spicy takes, because I know there are some real cruel boy enjoyers out there who rate them absolutely top dog. And I think that's because you know what you're doing with them. I think in Nemesis, they are heavily let down by a factional deck that, while it definitely has some powerful gems hidden, is overall a bit weak, a bit all over the place, and a bit still trapped in the old kind of meta when there were cover hexes all over the place. It's designed for that really fun Rivals matchup with Xandar's Truth Seekers. Those two Rivals decks are built to work together in a really fun way.
It's beautiful to watch.
Yeah, those two Rival decks are really fun, a great way to learn the game, I would say. In fact, possibly one of the best Rivals matchups for teaching the game.
That is absolutely how I would introduce people with those two, no question.
But it means you've got lots of cards that are really like niche and fringe outside of that matchup that you will not be wanting to take in Nemesis. So you've not got that many you want to take, so you have to find a Rivals deck that matches. And there's not a perfect match. I think Fearsome Fortress can work. I think maybe Illusory Might, or a rare case for Deadly Depths, because Deadly Depths makes you care about cover tokens, which has good synergy with their deck. But I think, again, you have to be very skilled to do well with them in this format. Championship, completely different ball game, in my opinion. I think they are so much more powerful because you don't have to worry about all their weak faction cards. You can replace them all.
And it lets you pick a direction that sort of, you can tool into something. And while sort of they are renowned for being really flex, sort of in no Nemesis deck gives them enough reliable glory to sort of mean that they are going to do well, and you have to be cagey, and you're going to get your wins by denying the other person, which is your skill, not them.
Yeah, denial is a skill rather than a deck building thing.
So where are you putting them, Stu?
I can hear someone in the distance screaming at me, but I think they're C tier.
I agree. Is that our first just outright agree?
No, it's not. We agreed on the Null Spirit pack.
Oh, yes, of course we did.
Yeah.
And then we come to Headcracker's Mad Mob, which is a warband that we're not very familiar with. I've played them a couple of times against you, mainly because we were seeing how they were placing in tournaments. And suffice to say, I haven't unlocked their raw power, but they are a deck that is placing well in tournaments, and I'm not sure if that is a mix of people who are dedicated to them, really knowing them, just that reliable boost that Primacy can give you, because they are the only warband that bring Primacy into the game now. And so, sort of, so long as you can be a little canny about it in sort of a decent-ish matchup, that's 3 extra glory you should be getting, which in Nemesis makes a massive difference. And then I've seen them do well with, just in results, with Seismic Shock. I've seen them do well with Tooth and Claw. Seismic Shock, you have that obvious weakness that you just have one wizard, but sort of keep him back, sort of protect him, sort of you can do things there. But they're one that we've not seen shine, but I think there is some great stuff there, and they do have a really fun set of abilities across them. Sort of their fighter profiles are decent, and they do a lot of fun stuff with Primacy.
Again, I think the 2 to 3 glory you're just going to get from being able to abuse Primacy should never be underestimated. In Nemesis, where your overall glory totals are lower, you're just starting with that kind of built-in advantage most of the time. And they're going to really love it if they're taking on a Horde warband, they can kind of farm for glory. I'm not so sure about Seismic Shock for them. Maybe some people are making it work. I'm always a bit anti-Seismic Shock for small warbands with one wizard, because you can kill the wizard.
I completely agree. I'm just sort of saying results that I've seen happen.
That's that. I don't want to, again, I don't want to be too disparaging, but I'm always a bit wary of Seismic Shock in smaller warbands, which is a stance I will absolutely then go on to completely disagree with later on, but that's okay. We're not experts on this warband, but I think we're looking at B, right?
B
tier. They're good. In the right hands, they're great, but we're not the right hands. And if we're not the right hands, that means not everyone is either.
More orcs.
Yeah, we're in the orc zone, which may or may not be intentional. No, it's Iron Skull's Boys. The first orc warband, and in many ways also the last, or at least in terms of where they're going to go on this tier list, which is not a spoiler if you know what to expect. So there is actually some good stuff in their deck. Genuinely, there are some good cards, particularly in the Gambits. And Iron Skull himself is a solid fighter with a decent profile. I know for a fact, I think they've won Rivals events just running Pure Tooth and Claw, which is a great combo. There's also something to be said, as there often is with good Tooth and Claw warbands, for Toxic Terrors. Like, I think that is those are good combos that can do quite well with them. But ultimately, you're massively let down by Basher and Hacker. I think it's Hacker and Basher, who are the just very underwhelming fighters who, uninspired, have attacks that are 2 Fury, 1 damage.
And to give it equivalent, sort of, if you take a much more recent warband, say Grincrack's Loon Court, Moonface Nags, sort of that tiny little goblin has 2 swords, 1 damage.
Yeah. And if you look at the models, of course, Hacker and Basher are big, tough-looking orcs who do not hit like it. If they inspire, they're a bit better, but there's still nothing to write home about. They have good health. I think that is an advantage. But I think just you're going to have to activate these 2 quite inferior fighters to get to use the 2 that are actually decent in a lot of games. Even with some fun cards in their faction deck and some obvious synergy with the more aggressive decks, they are a weak warband, which is not going to come as a surprise to anyone who knows the game.
Yeah.
D tier or F tier?
I think just based on the fact that they've won stuff, they have to go above the Godsworn Hunt.
I agree. No, I think because they just can do well with an aggro deck and they have some good cards, they're D tier, but not high D tier.
And then we have our final band of orcs, Morgoth's Crushers. Sort of end of Beastgrave, 3 5-wound fighters who just want to wreck your face, pretty much, and are very good at doing it and hard to take down themselves. They are a great warband, and sort of, if you want a nice simple time, you can go Tooth and Claw with them. I recently saw someone at a tournament recently who beat me with them and Fearsome Fortress, and it was spectacularly effective. And sort of, if you want to do something different with them that people might not expect, I would encourage you that way, because they're really good at it, and Morgoth's push, and they've got some objectives in there that key off objectives really nicely, but they've just got such a solid stat line, and the beta rules for them of sort of war tokens to make them a little harder to inspire don't hold them back that much.
Yeah, they're really solid in Nemesis. Having good attack profiles in Nemesis is just such an advantage because they've got innate 3 damage, uninspired and inspired. And if you do want to play the aggro game, I do recommend Tooth and Claw because it comes with cards that boost their accuracy, which is their weakness, especially Ardskull, who is their big heavy hitter on 3 damage uninspired. So I think if you're playing aggro, you can look in other directions like Toxic Terrors, but the accuracy boosts you get reliably from Tooth and Claw are just so solidly the way to go. They are fantastic. Top of A, I think, is where they go.
I was thinking myself sort of like A or S, and sort of, I think they are straddling that borderline.
I think top of A. And now we come to the Soul Raid, which is one of Mickey's absolute favourite warbands. So I'll let him do most of the talking here. They are such a high skill ceiling warband, which is in no way an insult. But if you are newer to the game, they're one to approach with care if you're thinking of using them. They've got so many little bitty rules and fun things going on. And until a certain deck came out, which you probably know the name of, they probably weren't amazing in Nemesis. You could run them okay with Tooth and Claw and Daring Delvers, but then Toxic Terrors came and changed the face of things.
Like, I think they were having a good time with Tooth and Claw, sort of the accuracy that it gave, they didn't need as much, but it was like, it worked for them. It was like, that's decent, and now they are soaring on Toxic Terrors, though. They have 2 amazing poisons in their deck, which are just a joy to bring. I took them to a tournament recently and had 7 poison cards, and so that meant my objectives, when I was pulling the poison objectives, were actually useful and keying off stuff, because I always had poisons going. It was really fun to play, and you can have so much fun with them. They are a little bit squishy, and you need to sort of, it is that case of you need to be sensible with them. You can be careless with Tyrell because you're hopefully going to get him back, but other people, it is about positioning, keeping yourself out of range. And your real MVP in that warband is Spinefin, who, for people who haven't played the Soul Raid or sort of don't get how they go, can seem a bit confusing, but it's like, no, Spinefin is absolutely amazing in just giving the support to what is already an accurate warband. It's just upping that. The main issue that they have is damage output, because sort of they really just cap out at 2. They've got an in-faction objective upgrade that will let them have extra damage on a wounded fighter, which is sort of just an annoying little thing, but one of their poisons will wound someone, which can be a nice little surprise take out a 4-wound fighter. And then Callous you can also combo with from Toxic Terrors, which is +1 if you have 2 poison upgrades, or if who you're attacking is poisoned. And if you've got 7 poisons, good odds on that. But yeah, so much fun. And I'm thinking they are A tier.
I was never in doubt that they were an A tier. I'd put them under the Crushers, but an A tier for sure.
Yeah.
You also forgot to mention that they have Doomclaw, which automatically puts you in A tier. Yes. I love that crab.
And Doomclaw also very easy to underestimate and just constantly scuttling up and will be there bringing your supports along as well. Because if someone's attacking from the other direction, sort of, just bring them along. And yeah, they've just got so many cards that are made for them getting people into other people's territory. So Doomclaw can just be sort of scuttling across the line. The fish is just appearing there. The fish is scoring you lurk in wait whenever it happens. The fish is preventing Hurricane Force. If you've got invading aggro coming back against you, you can sort of place against that. Sort of never underestimate the fish.
Words to live by.
Following that, we have Grashrax the Spoilers, a warband that neither of us have played.
It's true.
But sort of we have read up on and sort of seen about. Obviously, one of the Beastgrave start sets ones, bunch of hunters. Generally, they seem to suffer from just underwhelming fighter profiles. One of them starts on 1 block, and one of them goes to 1 block. Apart from that, they are 1 dodge across the board. So they are squishy little beastman. And then their attack profiles, you've obviously got sort of the 2 big hitters, but then the little Ungors with bows. They're just sort of struggling to get that damage out, and they inspire when 2 enemy fighters are out of action, which is hard to do with them, and you're relying on, I think it's Draknar.
Yeah, he's the big heavy hitter.
Yeah, you're really relying on him to do that, but then the rest sort of pulling their weight. You can sort of appear in surprising places.
They've got some good tricks.
But yeah, sort of their fighter profiles are holding them back. I think the best ways to go with them, they feel like they should be Tooth and Claw, but I think that is a trap. And actually, Fearsome Fortress or Daring Delvers, they have in-faction Surge Supremacy for 2 glory. So sort of that is a good way to go. With the 6 of them, they can sort of get holding those things with their tricks as well, because they've got some push tech in there. And I think you're going to have a better time there. And the little Ungors can get on those objectives and just ping their bows off from there whilst your other people are getting where they need to be. And I think that's the direction to take them to try and make it work.
I would agree. You'd think it'd be Tooth and Claw, but actually the Beastmen hate being beasts because they can't take objectives, because they are a classic flex warband in that they want to take objectives and kill you, which means they suffer from the classic flex weaknesses of just lacking focus, and it's slightly harder to deck build for them in Nemesis as a result, where it's harder to play a strong flex game because a lot of the decks are pulling you so strongly in one direction. So I mean, I think we're probably saying C tier, right?
Low C tier.
Yeah, low C. I think they're a warband, again, like the Cunning Crew. If you really know what you're doing with them, you can do well. But they are a high skill ceiling warband, very suited for an experienced player playing against a newer player with a stronger deck to give them a fun challenge sort of at the game.
Yeah, make yourself work for it.
Next, of course, we have a much more recent release, which is Grizel's Arenae, the gladiator elves of Narwood, who are a very fun aggro warband, in my opinion. They are such glass cannons. They will die to a stiff breeze, despite some good defense profiles. They have so little health, but they do have really good aggressive profiles with surprisingly good damage, particularly once you start getting the upgrades to abuse combo on them. They've got an insanely good upgrade deck. They are so much better than they look when you just purely glance at their fighter profiles. I'm not entirely convinced by some of their gambits that offer a reward and a punishment, but they're just very good for playing that glass cannon game where you will kill. If you can kill the enemy quickly enough, you'll win. Most of your elves will die, but that doesn't matter if you've killed them more.
I think also not to be underestimated with them, they are that little bit tougher than you expect. Sort of acrobatics can just sort of ruin someone's day. It's like, I did make that attack and I didn't take you out. It's rare, but on 2 dodge it can come up. And then they do have some fun damage reduction. So they have that classic -1 damage from attacks, and they also have that ploy, which reduces damage by 2 to a minimum of 1.
That is good.
And I've seen in Red Online if it's just doing 1 damage, that doesn't trigger that because it didn't actually trigger, and so it does sort of hold and carry over. So sort of they do have some of those things to help them get to round 3. They're also just really fun, sort of the flavour of them, all having their own little unique inspiration based on sort of what their kind of fighting style is. And the flourishes giving you scything in there, which sort of, if you're against a horde, that's great. And the other little flourishes just doing little things sort of, there is that risk reward to them, but you can always just sort of take those out if you don't like that gamble. But if you're there for that, that's a fun flavour in there as well.
When it comes to deck pairings, I know it's a Tooth and Claw a lot. We'll certainly get away from the aggro warbands, but again, Tooth and Claw feels a great one for them. It's invading, which they're really fast and good at. It boosts your accuracy. It gives you damage boosts and things like Dark Command. It's a solid deck. And I don't think they're going to enjoy Toxic Terrors as much because they're less focused on their leader being their best fighter, and they're not going to want to take the poisons because they've got solid gambits and upgrades of their own. Yeah. Why would they want to dilute that?
And everything else, you want to be focusing on your attacks. You don't want to be focusing on objectives.
Yeah. So I think it's a nice clear Tooth and Claw.
Where are you putting them?
B, but high B.
I was thinking low A, so we're in a very similar space. Where are you putting them next to Drappers?
I'd put them under Drappers. So top of B for now, yeah.
Ooh. The Headcrackers did not want to give that up.
No, they did not.
Next, we come to another warband that I absolutely adore, which is the Grimwatch, who were absolutely oppressive in Beastgrave when they came out. I think they were the first people to have that 2 glory surge for holding 3 objectives.
I don't know, maybe.
But sort of, they have that with 7 bodies. They have just 3 resurrect. You don't need to spend actions on it. So long as you have kept Crackmarrow alive, then sort of the start of each round, that is a crypt ghoul coming back. And you're probably going to have lost a couple of crypt ghouls. If you haven't, great. As well as it being something that can be there as an action. That one that sort of, just because of their poses and sort of flesh eater courts, you might think, this is Tooth and Claw again, but no, it's not. Fearsome Fortress. Fearsome Fortress is what you want to do with them. And Stu might disagree with me, but I'm here to wave the flag for Fearsome Fortress on them. Just because you're holding that line, so that's really good for their Inspire mechanic, sort of you're putting that line in place to sort of try and keep people back. You are going to bleed some glory with those crypt walls, but I think sort of when they Inspire, getting the 2 dodge, being able to go on guard and the guard tech in there, I think that's their best option.
I'm probably say I agree with you on that. I think they're a flexible warband in that there isn't, in my opinion, a best deck that you must take for them. They can do Daring Delvers, they can do Tooth and Claw, they can do Fearsome Fortress. I think that for my money, that none of them is a deck they're going to excel with. Fearsome Fortress makes them great at defending, but they only have, apart from Crackmarrow, range 1 attacks, so they can't sit back if the enemy's not willing to come to them, which they should, to be fair, to prevent inspiration. You can play aggressively, but they're not amazingly aggro. They don't have the accuracy or damage overall. Yes, Grizzlewell has great damage, but his accuracy is poor. He's only one fighter that you can't resurrect.
Yeah.
They don't have amazing accuracy or damage to play the pure aggro game. You're again looking at a flex warband, which means you have to kind of respond a bit to your opponent, which I think Fearsome Fortress is good for. And some of the other flex decks, which we'll talk about later for other warbands, like Void Curse Thralls, I don't love for them.
No, I agree. In terms of placing, I probably want to place them higher than they deserve, so I'm going to try and knock myself down and go high C.
That's exactly where I was going to suggest they go. So
I wanted to say high B, but I think that was my dreams rather than reality.
I wouldn't be shocked, like all I've seen so far, if there's someone who knows what they're doing and is kicking ass with these somewhere, but unfortunately I think they are showing their age.
Next, we have Hexbane's Hunters, which are basically coming up for a year old.
Wow.
Now. Hexbane's Hunters are one of the absolute kings of the Rivals format. And when you take them to Nemesis, you're almost playing Rivals. Most decks, when you see them, are just running a couple of other cards. They are a warband that have loved the salvage rules because they have such strong upgrades in their deck. But loads of them are locked to fighters, and now with salvage, when people die, because they're gonna die, they are a horde warband with sort of the 6 of them. When people die, you can get through those, but also when people die, you can get your upgrades down. Sort of a reaction that's very easy to forget. But sort of, when people die, those who are left are going to get a little bit stronger. They're one that sort of, I think the typical thing again would be Tooth and Claw to sort of run them with, giving them sort of the sort of a little bit more accuracy, so the things for invading, which go with some of the things, but you could also go Toxic Terrors with them, disabling opponents with some of those, just dip a toe.
You would be dipping the smallest toe, but their deck is good for that. I think Fearsome Fortress they could also do as well. It's worth pointing out, when we say Toxic Terrors or Tooth and Claw Fearsome Fortress, we are talking take a couple of cards from them. You're not going to play like the typical deck. You're not playing the Tooth and Claw full invading aggro with them. You're not playing the KG Fearsome Fortress. You're playing a very flexible, aggressive warband. And there's just something wonderful about the Hexbane's Hunters where they're one of the only warbands where when your fighters die, it doesn't just feel bad, it also feels good because one of the dogs is dead, great, the other one on Pock have inspired. One of your hunters dies, all the other ones get to get stronger in some way. And it's just a very fun experience to play as where you don't mind dying as much. And they've got a really strong Rivals deck, which translates to strong Nemesis performance. Even though in theory none of their weapons has massively high damage, apart from Bridget, they just really rack it up with those insanely good upgrades. And yes, Bridget is a glorious glass cannon. She dies every game, but sometimes she's able to just one-hit kill or scythe out a bunch of fighters before she dies. She is brilliant, and they are just a really solid warband that I think we have to put in A tier.
I agree, but where in A tier?
I would say probably second after Morgox.
I think it pains me to push Alathanes down, but I think I would agree that sort of they've got that stronger card. You can't block by not having a poison on the right person or sort of stuff like that. It's less your cards dictating how those things go, and your cards and the dice is for Alathanes and sort of just the dice.
Yeah.
So you've got less randomness on that.
And we haven't mentioned just how solid the dogs are for just giving you support to massively enhance your accuracy with your many, many ranged weapons.
Those dogs just charging people, well, not charging people down, moving up to whoever you want.
Yeah, and harrying and nipping at their heels. Wonderful warband. Really fun, I think, for new players. They're not too complicated, apart from their inspiration. Their inspiration is really annoying.
Their inspiration being very similar to what I said about Grizel's Arena. They all have unique ones, but sort of it doesn't feel quite as flavourful.
It's not as obvious with them, I feel.
Anyway, next up we have Hrothgorn.
Yeah, Hrothgorn's Man-Trappers going back to the Beastgrave. Their deck, of course, originally having, I think, 8 Surges, which is ridiculous. Someone, I think, once brought them to a rivals event planning to abuse this, but their surges don't have the best synergy. Their deck's a bit of a mess. But Hrothgorn himself is just a really solid, great fighter. He's got great damage, he's got great range, he's got great health, he's got great defense. He's got it all. However, he has got to carry a very weak sort of bunch of Noblars with him, which is a penance for being such an overall solid fighter. Again, remember I mentioned Beastbound Assault and Black Powders? Hrothgorn is the same thing. Gets the benefit from Beastbound Assault, but is already a kind of a stronger warband overall going into this. So I think really benefits a lot from that.
Yeah, Hrafnir doesn't have the defense that the monkey and the parrot have, but sort of has a better damage output, or a more reliable damage output than they do. And Hrafnir can go off by themselves rather than the monkey and the parrot sort of being tied to other people. You've also got Quiv doing something fun. I can't remember the name of the one with the man traps.
Bushwhacker.
But Bushwhacker is doing fun stuff, sort of putting those traps out. If you can then push people into it, sort of that's 2 damage with no dice. Sort of that's very useful and sort of can take some people out, or suddenly put someone who should be nice and tanky within range of Hrothgorn. Look at Thwack sort of pushing things. So they've all got sort of something fun going on in a way that KG and Pegs
literally
are there. And sort of all those things just sort of help push this warband up in a way that sort of Black Powders just didn't manage to replicate.
I think Black Powders, when they were designing them, they were trying not to recreate the man trappers. And also, I think it's, in my head with the Black Powders, an earlier draft of that warband was so overpowered that they nerfed it too much. But the original is still good. I think Beastbound Assault is a hilariously good deck on them. I can definitely see some potential in Fearsome Fortress for them as well, for playing a slightly more defensive game and making the enemy come to you, which is really very much
what Hrothgorn wants.
It's really what Hrothgorn wants. And it'll let you protect your Noblars, who are extremely bite-sized, quite well. The question then is, where do we put it, though?
I think ultimately this is someone who does do better in Championship than Nemesis. And so I'm thinking B tier.
Oh, I think B tier as well. In fact, I think bottom of B from the ones we have so far.
I think because of my experiences, I'm thinking above Mad Mob. But
I think we underestimate the power of the 3 at the primacy the Mad Mob get, and they should go at the bottom for now.
Next, we have Canaan's Reapers, a warband that Stu recently took to a tournament, and sort of he practiced against me with a bit before, to spectacular effect.
I love the Reapers, I love the Ossiarch, I love the models, I love the theme, I love the playstyle. It's one of my favourite warbands. I love all the movement shenanigans they have. I love how intimidating Kanan is, and he can back it up, but his main role is mostly to scare opponents the entire game, which is fantastic. The real killing machine has actually been Argenta, and you can tell the most experienced players who fought against them before because that's who they go for, not Kanan. But if you ignore him, he will do great damage. And they were doing okay in Nemesis before. You could probably pair them with Fearsome Fortress and do okay. They weren't great with Tooth and Claw because they didn't really synergize very well with their movement shenanigans.
Yeah, Mortek Advance and Savage Fighters just do not combo.
But then they brought out Void Curse Thralls, and it is a beautiful, beautiful combo on them. Most of them, with 1 or 2 exceptions, don't really mind being Void Cursed. It's actually a buff or neutral. It can really shut down enemy fighters. It gives them even more movement cards and has good synergy with their deck. So you can make a really powerful deck by combining the 2. It's just really fun to play Void Reapers, and not against every warband, really effective. They do have a weakness in that they have a lot of 2-wound fighters that the enemy can pick off to bleed glory, but they're able to score enough that quite often you'll be able to make up the difference.
And actually, with Voidcast Thralls, you can make people pay for going after the Mortex.
As I have done to great effect, deliberately sending a Mortek on a careless charge purely so I can spend the Void Curse when they die. It's extremely fun. I'm a man who appreciates a dirty trick, and the no-nonsense soldiers of the Ossiarch are surprisingly good for dirty tricks. A tier.
But the question is where? I'm thinking above Hexbanes.
I can't be trusted to be unbiased here.
True.
Probably below Morgoth's Crushers because they're a bit more reliable. They do take some getting used to, Canaan's Reapers, and they do have bad matchups.
They also have the skill ceiling issue. Sort of, you need to work out how to properly make use of Mortec Advance, possibly trying to make use of Netherite, or just make sure that the other person is afraid of Netherite.
Yeah.
Because that can be effective as a deterrent as well. But yeah, and not sort of thinking, oh, well, I just use Canaan, because that's the wrong way to play and you won't perform very well. But it is kind of tempting. Oh, I have this big bone construct. Charge.
I think Turbo Kanan is more of a thing for Championship. It's not Survival Nemesis. He's still great. He's still fantastic. But they are a team. They are a team and should be played as a team, and they are wonderful in that niche.
For another warband that really doesn't function as a team, at least from their lore, we have Kagra's Ravagers. Kagra the Usurper, who usurped Zarsha, who is still on the team, two lovely bickering sisters, and that certainly doesn't tear the warband apart. What tears this warband apart is their stat line for a lovely aggro warband and their Inspire mechanic that makes you really care about objectives and not want to get off them because the desecration. Yeah. The desecration mechanic is really easy for other people to undo. All they have to do is get on a token that is desecrated and it's undone. It certainly massively helped them having the beta rules so that it's only 2 that they need rather than 3, but they're just being pulled in different directions. They're a warband that you can go to from Claw, lean into the aggro side, possibly just accept you're unlikely to inspire, and if you do, that's a nice bonus. Or you can lean into the Fearsome Fortress, sort of thinking more sort of like, no, we are going to get that inspire, but your only innate range from your fighter profiles is Zarsha, who they did a very cruel thing to and made her much more likely to hurt herself than any other wizard, because if her spell fails, she hurts herself. And if it succeeds on a double crit, she hurts herself. So sort of there is just that sort of really hard thing of keeping her alive.
She's also only 3 wounds, just to really rub salt in that wound when the rest of them are all 4.
Yeah. They do have some brilliant upgrades and really fun, and the Flaming Sword is not to be sniffed at. So it does mean that with Fearsome Fortress you can have 2 ranged weapons.
That's true.
Which is very nice, but you need to get them, and you can't always rely on drawing them.
And they've got a shield upgrade that makes you completely immune to spells, I think.
They do indeed.
Very niche pick, but in this current meta, perhaps a strong one, which we'll see come up later in the discussion.
However, all things considered, I think we're looking at
Top of D.
Are they worse than Grashrax the Spoilers?
We're not 100% sure, but I think yes. I just think they're being pulled all over the place. And fundamentally, if you want to play a 4-fighter aggro warband, there are better choices that are easier to use for better results. If you want to take them, it's because you love them or because you want a challenge, sadly.
And I kind of love them because they're just so fun in flavour. And yeah, I wish they were higher, but I think you're right.
And I think an important thing to say about this game is if a warband isn't top tier, that's okay. And in friendly games, it maybe is fun to take the weaker warbands against each other rather than throwing them against a top tier warband and being unsurprised that they lose. Yeah. But maybe don't take them to any tournaments. I'm sorry. Other people won't have that approach.
Yeah, sort of play them with your friends against the people, the tier up, the tier below, the tier of. And yeah, sort of appreciate them with their peers.
And next we come to another older warband with the Mournflight, the Banshees who are very, very hard to tell apart. And they've got a really nice faction deck, the Banshees. They've got some really solid stuff going for them. They have that common problem of being quite a flimsy fight warband with not a huge amount of wounds. Excellent defense to offset that, but obviously that means if the dice go your way, they're untouchable. If the dice abandon you, then the poor wounds means they'll crumble very quickly. They also lack range, which can be a problem. I think there's some strong synergy in both Daring Delvers and Fearsome Fortress because their faction deck pushes you to care about objective tokens with some really easy surges for just being on objectives or flying through them, which is wonderfully easy passive glory.
Yeah, they are great in that way, and sort of that one that sort of you can really set yourself up for some easy surges with your board choice, making sure you've got a blocked hex or sort of a blocked hex on either side that is likely to be near the front, and then placing your objectives so that sort of you can do one where they need to move through two on a move, and sort of you can sort of set yourself up in that way so that when those come, those are easy glory, and hopefully you can combine that into a charge as well. But yeah, they do have the massive issue of sort of they can just fall apart so easily if the dice say no. Something that really leans towards those two decks that you said as well are the guard tech that you get in Fearsome Fortress. Because 2 dodge, going on guard, that's fun, and then zone of control from Daring Delvers. So whichever way you're looking, anything that will help you go on guard for free and you're not spending actions or giving it to other people as well, that's really your friend.
They've got quite good attack profiles as well, where they're either somewhat accurate or high damage, never both. They're not. Their attack profiles aren't the ones you take into pure aggro, but they do hit pretty hard.
Yeah, they're all on swords, which is always a bit like, this is less reliable, but sort of, yeah, it can be deceptively effective. And if they're bunching up on people, which again they have objectives that encourage you to do, they can really rip people apart with a little bit of dice luck and using those supports.
However, one thing that's really dragging them down at this moment in time in the game, because right now we're in a bit of a ping meta, which is quite powerful in Nemesis, especially if someone's taking Daring Delvers and is a wizard, which means lots of ping cards, your defense doesn't matter, and your low health suddenly becomes a huge liability, because that ability to abuse your great defense, you will just crumble, which really means right now is not the time for the Mournflight to soar. I think they're still going to do okay in the rankings, but they're not top. I think they're B.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Bottom of B?
Bottom of B, sadly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to Mournflight fans, we love them too, but the ping meta is not your friend.
Okay, and then we have Mollog's Mob, the original sort of Voltron warband, having that one massive linchpin fighter. His rules have been changed a little bit, so sort of make sure you're up to date on the beta rules for him. His card is not quite correct as printed now anymore. I think for him, don't underestimate the people around him either. Sort of when you fight with him, those squigs can really sort of be difficult. Well, the bat squig can really be difficult if you let it inspire. The Stallard squig is going to be annoying, and the mushroom is here.
The mushroom is here, and they have got scything, they just haven't got the speed to make any good use of it.
Yeah. In terms of what you're doing with them, this is one way you can just take Tooth and Claw, just to sort of charge forward. Sort of, it's a very easy, gives you a clear direction. Stick the Stallard squig in enemy territory, so you've already got one fighter over there. But the Stallard squig, you're going to have to stagger it to make it savage, because it can't take enough wounds and it's not going to charge. So sort of it has some anti-synergy there for what might seem like an obvious pairing.
Beastbound Assault?
Beastbound Assault is probably the way to go, yeah.
Because already you've got a bunch of beastbound fighters who are all beasts, obviously, who save you a lot of work. I think it's a good combo for them, but the real killer for these guys in Nemesis is, my goodness, their faction deck is terrible. They have an absolutely atrocious selection of objectives. Really terrible stuff. So you're going to be running a almost pure rivals deck, and that's almost never a good thing for most people on the tiers, which I think really pulls them down. When they first came out, I think they were incredibly oppressive, but unfortunately, or fortunately for those who hate them, we're a long way away from the time when everyone was running for Mollog. He is much, much easier to pick on and bully now. Certainly someone to be careful of, because obviously in Nemesis, anyone with incredibly high damage should not be underestimated. But I think the mushroom days are over a little bit.
So, thinking-wise, I'm probably going low C.
I think low C.
Bottom of C.
Bottom of the C. Again, if someone who knows what they're doing or gets really hot on the rolls will do well with them, because again, that pure damage can't be underestimated. It's stopping them from going any lower, I think, especially in Nemesis. But that's kind of all they've got going for them, I feel. The Blade Covenant next, who I think you all know are not going to be super high. They're a highly technical warband with lots of kind of like nice little tricks, but they've got an annoyingly hard inspire condition when they inspire essentially off killing the enemy or being the third round. And that almost all of their fighters have one dodge and very bad health until they inspire. Their leader and the... is it Kyrie, the Snake Archer? They're solid fighters. The rest, sadly, aren't. And they're a flex warband that wants to be killing and taking objectives, but they haven't got the numbers to be great at taking objectives, and they're very flimsy when they're on them, and they haven't got the raw damage to be doing great in the aggro game. They are really falling in that horrible flex hole of being masters of none. And again, they're just so flimsy that I think this really holds them back.
Yeah, and with that and their objectives, you can go a bunch of different routes with them, sort of with the aggro or with the objective holding and sort of Prison Fortress, but none of them are going to do great. None of them are going to make up for that, and you're probably going to have to lean really heavy on that objective deck, sort of whichever rivals deck you're picking, sort of try and give you some direction and focus there, because they lack the durability to be flex. Is this going to be our first F?
I think it might, and I'm sure there's at least one person listening right now who plays them regularly and does well with them, and will, come out in the comments to disagree. But I think they're an F. They're really, really struggling. Maybe if you're an expert, but there's just no deck pairing that fixes them is the issue.
And things like Iron Skull's boys, if we look up at D tier, they have at least you can tooth and claw.
Yeah.
And sort of they've got some health behind them.
These guys don't.
Next up, we have Mayari's Purifiers. So one of the Diachasm starter sets. The obvious pairing for these ones with the one wizard is Seismic Shock, but then you have that risk of, does your wizard stay alive and having 3 people to get on things? They are a warband that we haven't seen tons of. And I got resoundingly trounced by them recently. Mayari's Purifiers versus the Soul Rage, only one person died all round, and that was Elephane. Sort of in 24 activations, we had one successful attack, which was really bizarre. I think they are sort of a really strong one for passive glory. Their deck encourages it, and so they can tie in well with that Seismic Shock direction, but you've got the Wizard weakness, or you can tie in on a Fearsome Fortress direction that pulls you forwards a little bit more, but people will get to you eventually, even if you go at the back of the board. But sort of, it gives you more flexibility and makes Mayari less of a linchpin.
I agree. I think, Seismic Shock is good for them, but I'm always going to say 4 fighter, 1 wizard. If that wizard dies, you're in big trouble, and Mayari is not exactly a tank. So if I was playing against you, I know that's what I want to do. I want to kill them and just ruin your life. Fearsome Fortress is good. The new deck, which we haven't seen yet, Path to Prophecy, they're one of the few warbands that could look at it. I don't think they should take it over Fearsome Fortress or even Seismic Shock, but maybe I'm wrong. Their one might be worth a look, because you are going to be playing the hold objective passive glory game with them, and probably doing quite well at it.
I think purely for the passives, I'm possibly thinking they're up in B.
I actually think they're in B as well. They're low B, because they are still vulnerable. They haven't got a lot of health. With a bit of bad luck on their defense, they will fold. And in the ping meta, sometimes you don't even need to have bad defense rolls to fold.
I think they possibly come above Lady Harrows, though, because they do have range on their side. So they've got that bit more flexibility, and sort of
I'd put them above Hrothgorn, actually. Because they've got range. And is it Bararoth? Is that how you say his name? Banahar. The big hammer guy has got great damage and great defense, which, again, in Nemesis, never underestimate someone who's got 3 damage, and they've got 3 damage. So So that keeps them up nice and high.
Does that put them above the Mad Mob?
I don't think we know enough about the Mad Mob, and I really think the primacy is powerful. They've already got that gives the Mad Mob just passive glory. Yeah. They're getting passive glory.
Okay.
And there we come to Sepulchral Guard, who very recently had quite the glow up, which we haven't played with the new version yet. I should give you that as a big caveat. So our opinions are even less informed on this than others.
However, the tournament we were just at, neither of the Sepulchral Guards that were there placed in the top half.
That doesn't mean it's not amazing, or at least good. It's a really improved deck, and it really keys into their strengths of being one of the best hold objective warbands in the game, because they have the numbers and they have the resurrection that they can be
sustain
on
the
tokens.
Numbers.
Exactly. And I have played with the old deck back in sort of Shadespire card times. The Harvester is really fantastic, especially when you get a few upgrades on them. And they're one of the few fighters who can die and come back to have more upgrades. So they can do quite a bit of damage with some luck, very defensively, because their speed is terrible. But they are going to bleed glory because it's so easy to pick off the skeletons, frankly.
Yeah.
All Horde warbands bleed glory, but the Sepulchral Guard bleed it really very poorly.
However, their glow up has given them some block where they were dodge.
Yeah, that's
so
a big improvement.
They are not throwing it out quite as badly as they were.
And that brings us neatly to deck pairings. Fearsome Fortress is an extremely easy and obvious choice. It helps you get on tokens, it gives you defense on tokens, synergizes really well with their game plan. I think there's also a really strong case for Void Cursed Thralls, where only the Warden loses out for being Void Cursed, and it gives them movement shenanigans to get back on tokens. It gives them another focus in Void Cursing people. Yeah. They can easily score some of those Void Curse objectives. And the fact that when you Void Curse, you can't be driven back, again, really helps their hold objective playstyle.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think that is one that I would like to see. And I think one of the people did take that. And yeah, I wish I'd got to go against that. Because yeah, sort of, as soon as we can get our hands on that deck of cards, I think that's something that we're going to be trying.
Absolutely. I think top of C, but I want listeners who disagree with me to know that I'm really not confident in this because I haven't seen it in action yet, to be honest. So feel free to sort of yell at me for this one. I might be completely wrong. You're thinking bottom of B, aren't you?
No, I'm thinking mid-C. I'm thinking Grimwatch and Cunning Crew above them.
Sure. Fundamentally, I don't really know with this one. So it's kind of a bit of a guess anyway. But I know they're not bottom and I know they're not top. They're not S, they're not A. Yeah. They're not F.
Possibly we are thinking too much about their old deck and not appreciating their new one enough for having not seen it in action. So possibly they've been done a disservice here.
Interestingly, with the new Paths of Prophecy deck, I don't think that's a good pick for them. I think they'll do much better with Void Cursed Walls or Fearsome Fortress, even though Paths of Prophecy is all about kind of passive hold objective gameplay. Yeah. They haven't got the movement to take advantage
they don't have
of
the
it.
Speed of sort of like, oh, we need to get to a certain number. Number 5's over there, which will do most of the work for us. That's 4 turns of activations just to get there.
They're just too slow, even with double movements now as standard, unfortunately.
Next up, we have Skaif's Wild Hunt, the other half of the Rescrave starter set. They are a warband that I absolutely adore, partly because they are beautiful. It also amuses me that they just don't really exist in Age of Sigmar. And so there's just this random extra faction that has been tacked onto Sylvaneth to make them work. But they are just so beautiful. They are the sort of poster boys for Always Be Charging, because that is how they inspire. So yeah, if you are ever not doing that with your first activations with them, that's quite confusing. They have a wizard who is a bit of a trap, and sort of I generally ignore that he's a wizard. And the wizard also has a horn that he can blow to give you rerolls. But again, this is something that feels like it's showing its age on that warband, and it's something where you have to choose to spend that token before you roll dice to be allowed to do a reroll. So which, when I've used it, has just been like guaranteed way of meaning that I get crits ahead of time, and it takes an action to get me there, and sort of, there are no other ways to get that. The obvious thing to do with them is Tooth and Claw, because sort of they are fast.
Hoof and Claw?
hoof and claw, absolutely. Sort of a few cloven hooves getting in there, and Scaife literally attacking with them. But yeah, sort of, they are fast, they are getting in your face, they are just so good at those objectives, and anything else, you're just making your life harder. And they don't have the stat line to sort of do that anyway. They really sort of... Carthaean can get really good damage. Scaife is really good damage, but sort of they just don't seem to get the success that you feel like they could. And I think the other three let them down a little bit.
The other three are extremely poor. Their damage is at best average. Their defense is actively bad. They're going to just hand the opponent glory because you have to charge, and only one of them is an archer. Whereas the other two are decent fighters, but a warband with two decent fighters and a bunch of dead weight is not a top tier warband, no matter how pretty they are and no matter how much you love centaurs.
But they are better than a warband with no decent fighters.
This is true. I think, and we're probably going to come to blows here, that they're in D tier.
So I'm in a really weird space of I think they are better than Grashwax's spoilers, but I don't think they're as good as Mollog's Mob.
That is so specific. And I guess comes down to us not agreeing completely on things.
Yeah.
But you think they're C tier. I think everyone, apart from maybe the Despoilers and Mollog's Mob, will take them apart in that tier.
Okay.
Well, while Licky takes a minute to cool off, let's talk about the Shadeborn, who I have admittedly a pretty conflicted history with after I went to a tournament just after they'd been released and had to take them on 3 times and was just absolutely sick of them to the point where I didn't even want to play against them or with them for a year because I was just so bored.
That changed this weekend, and that's the first time that I have ever got to see them in action,
Yep.
having heard about it.
They were much worse then, of course, because it was Championship, and that was at the height of the token flip meta, which they were the undisputed Queens and King at, which I did not care for, because I found it a bit too passive and boring to deal with. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how they are in Nemesis. We're now seeing them in a world where cover tokens are less ubiquitous, so their cards have to do the work for them. However, they have some good tricks. They're an extremely tricksy faction with all kinds of lovely things, and their defensive reroll before they inspire is good. It is very good at keeping them alive in a way that most sort of flimsy elf warbands with 3 wound fighters aren't able to match. They've got movement shenanigans. They've got a lot going for them, even if they have got quite flimsy profiles and not amazing damage output. In terms of what cards decks you want to put them with, they seem like there's 2 obvious choices for me, which is Deadly Depths, because it's suggesting you go on to cover hexes, which is what they want to do anyway. Make sure you bring a board with cover hexes. And Daring Delvers, because that encourages you to make your own cover hexes and maybe get some points into the mix. And they can take advantage of things like Flame Wisps, Sudden Demise, because they have faction ping and can really take a lot more dirty tricks from Daring Delvers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sort of Daring Delvers is the way to go for them. I think Deadly Depths, you will surprise people, but I think there is a little bit more for them in Daring Delvers. But it's nice that Deadly Depths exists for someone.
Indeed. And it's pretty much just them. Bottom of B?
Yeah, I think that feels about right for them. Although I do want to take just a moment to appreciate the perfect symmetry we have right now, because that was not expected. And then we are on to the other one from that core set, Skittershank's Claw Pack, the Ultimate Leader Assassins. I would sometimes argue that that's what Elephant Soul Raid are the ultimate ones out, but they have the mechanics to back it up, at least. For these ones, they suffer from a poor objective deck. They've got some glorious ploys, some very fun upgrades, but not a full deck of great upgrades. And so you're really going to be leaning on the objective deck of whoever you pair them with. And something sort of Stu has often said, but what about after the leader's dead? What then? And so that's what you're sort of leaning on your pairing with Tooth and Claw is an obvious way to go with them. Sort of it gives you some accuracy. Generally, if you're going leader hunting, that's going to encourage you to be sort of invading, going into the other place, because someone might pull that leader back more. If it's Morgox, probably not, but sort of some leaders will pull back. You can also go Daring Delvers with them, sort of some of that ping to sort of get the leader down, take them out that way, and sort of as you're going forwards, because again, you're likely to be invading. But yeah, sort of they just have that letdown of their objectives, and you're going to have to lean heavy. But they do have a couple of just gloriously fun ones. They've got one that some other factions have an equivalent of as well, which is if a minion dies, you get a glory too. And that's just so satisfying when one of yours dies and you're like, I'll have some glory, thanks.
That is fun and rewards you for using them as the disposable pieces they are, yes. I wanted to say Toxic Terrors is good for this, but the problem is their ploys and gambits are some of the best things they have. And to get the most out of Toxic Terrors and its objectives, you need to go heavily on toxins.
But hey, they have some poison traps, right?
Which don't have the poison keyword, so they can't benefit from having them as part of the deck. Which is a shame, because I think otherwise Toxic Terrors is a really fun direction for them that gives them something to do apart from kill leaders, which is poison everyone, which is thematically incredibly appropriate for them. But I think these feel like they're one of those other technical warbands that someone who lives and breathes Clan Eshin can probably do really well with, but most people will find underwhelming and is therefore C tier.
Yeah.
And probably low C.
I was really wondering, about where in C to put them. I'm thinking more mid. Would you really put them below the Beastman?
I'd put them above Beastman, below Sepulchral Guard, but it's a little bit vague at this point in time, to be honest.
I can live with that. Next up, we have Ripper's Snarlfangs.
Ripper's Snarlfangs are a warband I like a lot. But there's a very simple thing to understand with Snarlfangs. There's definitely a lot to be said for clever positional plays, but you are going to win or lose based on are the wolves biting. If your dice are hot on the wolves bite, they can take out loads of fighters on a single charge and just do devastatingly good work, all of them. But their attacks are not accurate and they will miss. And if the wolves are not biting, then your actual aggressive output is really poor and you're charging into the enemy to your deaths. And in Nemesis, you can't make clever builds to play them in as exciting in different ways. Realistically, you are probably going to be taking Tooth and Claw for the extra accuracy and damage from things like Dark Commands. You could take Toxic Terrors, but they've got good gambits, good ploys that you will be losing out on if you fill them with poisons. And, like the Skaven from before, they have some poison cards that don't have the poison keyword, just to sort of, just to really tease you with what could have been. Yeah. I think Tooth and Claw is the way to go. Objectives like Move or Die are laughably easy for them. They love a lot of the upgrades that it gives. I know some people have found this just absolutely dominating their local metas, but I don't think, and those people probably think, oh, it's top of S, top of A. No, because they're ultimately quite reliant on the dice. Yeah. They don't have the accuracy to be the true monsters, even if they can definitely take any S-tier warband with hot dice. That's a big proviso that I think relegates them to probably A tier.
I was thinking top of B.
I could accept that.
Because of sort of for that dice dependency. And I think it is, Tooth and Claw as well. It gives accuracy upgrades, but not all of those apply to the Wolf Jaws. And so, because that one can't be modified in the same way. Rerolls, great. Extra dice, no.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of reroll support in the Nemesis decks, sadly. So again, I would accept top of B for them. And again, I know some people are shocked at this, but that's fine. We're not always going to agree.
Next up, we have some more goblins. Grincrack's Loon Court. And Grincrack's Loon Court are beautiful models. They are so fun. If you don't know this warband, go and look at pictures of them, because they are gorgeous. They are little night goblins who think they are Bretonia, and they are having an amazing time. When it comes to the game,
you may not have an amazing time.
Exactly what I was about to say, yeah. They are struggling. Their objective deck is all over the place. They are a one that sort of brought in caring about numbers again. With Path to Prophecy, we've got some caring about numbers there. It's possible they might be able to do something because sort of they might be able to double up on some of those to get some sort of extra glory there, and they don't want to be charging forwards. But then you've got people like Gribda Wonky Lance and some of their quest objectives, which are how you're going to inspire, except for off your surges. And yeah, they're just pulled in different directions. They have such a clear identity and theme, but it doesn't come through in that deck. And there isn't a deck that sort of can wholly fix those things. I think if you want to make them work, Fearsome Fortress is the way to go. Sort of some of the guard techs sort of holding there, and it lets them do that mix of hold objective and attack, sort of depending on which ones they're with. And yeah, they have so many glorious people, but the sum of the parts is not equal.
I have to agree on Fearsome Fortress and all your general points. The annoying thing about them is that most seven fighter warbands, most hordes, will have some sort of movement trick. Zarbag's Gits have one. You have some of the 6 fighter warbands, like the Mortex we discussed earlier, or the Skinks we'll get to later. Sepulchral Guard can do a double move with the Warden. They have none of these things. They have no movement shenanigans to help them get on tokens or run away around the enemy, and they don't have keywords, which is a huge problem, because if they had keywords like Minion, which it feels like they should...
You'd think Beastbound Assault would be a natural match for them.
But it isn't, because they lack the keywords, making it a truly terrible option, because it's not worth putting upgrades on these flimsy fighters to give them keywords. It isn't worth it. But if they had them, Beastbound Assault would be a fantastic match, but they don't. They're trapped, I think, really with Fearsome Fortress in Nemesis, and... maybe Path to Prophecy, but I'm kind of sceptical, to be honest with you. Possibly Void Curse Falls?
Yeah, Void Curse Falls is what I was about to say. I think there might be some joy to have. So like, yes, please splat my little goblin, and oh, you're suddenly suffering the curse. I'm so sorry.
I think they deserve some experimentation, but sadly, they are never going to be the top of Nemesis in particular. Probably better in Championship, but probably still not amazing there either because of the lack of keyword support. We're looking at C or D, aren't we?
Oh, I thought we were looking at F.
I think bottom of D. I don't think they're F. Grib's good. And they've got some okay objectives for passive and some okay sort of upgrades. I think put them in D. We'll put them at the bottom of D if you think they're that terrible. I haven't piloted them, and you have.
Yeah, and so like I even had a win with them, and sort of
That's entirely fair. Continuing on the Goblin Horde theme, we have the original version of them, which is Zarbag's Gits, the only 9-fighter warband in the game. The truest of hordes, who do have movement shenanigans, which, of course, the Loon Court look at enviously. And they've got the wonderful Snurk, who is absolutely bizarre, sort of deadly, and just mostly weird. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Obviously, with the 9 fighters, they're pretty terrible across the board, apart from maybe Snurk. Maybe. They're terrible, but that's fine. Quantity is a quality all of its own. And I think that means they lend themselves well to Fearsome Fortress, because they can easily control tokens. Maybe Path to Prophecy through sheer numbers. Maybe. But here is me giving you a risky suggestion in Seismic Shock. So if you're playing Seismic Shock, keeping Zarbag alive is the most important thing possible, but you have enough bodies that you can hopefully just form a wall of them.
A literal wall.
A literal wall of goblins to mean that hopefully only flying fighters can get through, or teleport shenanigans, so you can protect your leader, because you've got enough goblins with enough movement tricks to get on objectives. Sadly, they have an extremely limited and extremely poor faction card pool to pull from, which really hampers them in Nemesis. I think they could be better in Championship, where you can get good cards to really abuse movement and just get on tokens and not care about dying, but you don't have that in Nemesis. You just don't.
Pull your objectives from Seismic Shock and Fearsome Fortress and Path to Prophecy, because only one of those 3 has a plot card.
Yeah, no. Again, I think this is one that would be way higher in Championship. Not top, but decent. But in Nemesis, their own terrible, terrible faction deck pushes them right down to D, I think. But above the other goblins in D.
I would say above the Godsworn Hunt as well.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I was thinking possibly just below Black Powders.
Yeah, I'm fine with that position for them because, again, the numbers can't be underestimated.
Yeah, and they have some truly terrible attack profiles, but they've got like 5 terrible attack profiles, whereas Iron Skull's boys only have 2 terrible attack profiles.
It's true.
Speaking
of terrible attack profiles.
Yes, sort of Two Swords is apparently the track that we're on right now of the Sons of Velmorn, one of our core sets from Nullwood. So, paired up with the Null Spirit pack, you have high expectations. They are another one which are really fun for their theme. Sort of, they lean into that sibling rivalry, sort of the whole family theme, really well. The illegitimate child, sort of picking on the youngest child, who is also clearly the best. Thane fourth and last, absolutely not. We don't have a good pun for that one. I am sorry, but like Thane for life, Thane for death. Yeah, they have really fun ideas around the support mechanics, giving support from the command tokens and inspiring off of that. But because they need to get a crit to do it, it's so unreliable, and you're not throwing enough dice with that warband that you can rely on getting crits. If they get an early crit and sort of start inspiring, they can do quite well, but that's such a big if, and if they don't, they will be failing so many attacks and sort of really struggling, and there's only so much work that Jedron can do, because you really need to keep Velmorn alive to try and help the others get that inspiration.
Yeah, no, it's a real problem in that I have seen games where they get early crits and excel because they are much better inspired, but it's not a guarantee. You need to be cagey with Velmorn, who is your best fighter, because if he dies, you're going to struggle to inspire the others. The two of your 3 Graveguard are really quite poor. They're 3 wound fighters that feel more like 2 wound fighters in terms of their profile. So there are 5 fighter warband that aren't that elite. Their deck is just a bit unfocused. Yeah. It's a flex deck on a warband that feels like they shouldn't be flex, in my opinion. They should be a bit more firmly focused. I think your best bets are Fearsome Fortress, because they haven't got great speed, but it lets them play both tokens, which some of their cards will support, and some aggression. Or Void Cursed Thralls, because they're a warband that will appreciate the shenanigans, appreciate an extra dimension in the form of Void Cursing people and benefiting from that. And they don't have much to lose from being Void Cursed, frankly. So I think that's a really fun combo with them. But ultimately, with them being pulled in different directions and being reliant on you rolling crits, no matter how well you build your deck, you can just win or lose based on, do you get those crits in round 1 or round 2? They, I think, are relegated... Or ever. They're relegated to the C tier with the technical warbands, where I'm sure there are people out there who can rock Velmorn at the high levels, but your average player who's not super experienced is probably not going to win all that often with them.
And I feel like they're going low C tier, because even if sort of you know what you're doing with them, you still need that crit, and you cannot make it come up crit.
It is true. I agree. We'll put them in low C.
Where are you putting them amongst these, or just...
That's fine.
There we go.
Yeah. Next, we come back to Season 1, and one of my personal favourite warbands. I know you're out there, Skaven enjoyers, and in many ways this is the purest Skaven experience with Spikeclaw's Swarm. Scritch, of course, possibly the king of Season 1.
I think the greatest of Season 1, yes?
Yeah, absolutely the greatest of Season 1, yes. Unfortunately, they are showing their age, partly in having very few cards to pull from, which is that problem with a lot of Season 1 and 2 fighters, where they are forced to rely very heavily on a single Rivals deck. And that is the problem with them in Nemesis, because their own cards only have a few worth taking, and I won't mince words, rats are mostly inaccurate and low damage. You can bring the minions back, which is brilliant, but they are terrible offensively, and that is a problem. The way to go around this in Championship is to bring loads of attack action upgrades that can turn a lonely minion into a hero killer. You can't do that here. There's only one deck that has more than one attack action upgrade off the top of my head, and that is, of course, Illusory Might. So that might be a good match for them, but those are literally illusions, and you will lose them. There's a weird argument for Deadly Depths, because it gives them a direction to hop onto cover tokens. It gives a wonderful card, Lurking Horror, which is banned in all of the formats than Rivals and Nemesis, which is brilliant on Scritch, and it also comes with one of the cursed boarding weapons, I believe, which is a fantastic thing, but a lot of other cards are quite weak. You could also go in a Toxic Terror's direction, because Toxic Terror is just a wonderful internal synergy sort of Rivals deck that just could plug into nearly any gap. They're not going to rock the world with any of these, sadly, though. Their best fighter is easily Scritch, who even now is very effective with his incredibly easy to inspire, threat range of 7, can get anywhere, 3 damage, but he can die and you will lose.
Actually, what you've just said there about their Inspire mechanic is a spectacular reason not to go Toxic Terrors with them, because you want to be choosing yourself with ploys, and all of the poisons, apart from one, which gives you Grievous, you're picking opponents. And so that's really limiting your ability to inspire yourself.
Very good point. And there is one in Tooth and Claw that can do a mass inspire, I think, potentially.
Savage Season.
Yeah. So that is perhaps a reason to go Tooth and Claw. But unfortunately, Tooth and Claw, they're not that powerful aggressively. It's probably a bit of a trap in Nemesis, unfortunately. Again, I love Spikeball Swarm. They are definitely stronger than this in Championship. But as with most Season 1 and 2 warbands, right now, Nemesis is not the format for them. And with great pain, are they C or D?
D.
I think they are D, and
Sorry.
it hurts my soul, but they are D. I think the threat range of Scritch and the fact they can bring fighters back protects them from the bottom of D, because those aren't to be underestimated.
I'm looking around Black Powder.
I think you're right. I think
Above
you're
or
right.
Below.
I will avert my eyes because it hurts so much.
Put it above just to
Put it below. No, it's true. I've seen Black Powder be well piloted. I haven't seen anyone bring Scritch to a tournament anytime recently.
Well, it's okay. We're going to talk about an amazing old warband now, Stormsire's Cursebreakers.
The scourge of their time.
Yep, absolutely dominated during Night Vault, sort of bringing magic onto the scene and making it work. And now we have Seismic Shock, which is the obvious one to pair them with, and it is going to make Stormsires work the best that Stormsires can work.
Which, as you can tell from Mickey's enthusiastic tone of voice, isn't that great. It's a great combo for them because every single one of the cards and upgrades can benefit all of them. It makes it easier than it has ever been to inspire Rastus and Amis with at least one card that is a spell that you auto-cast if you run an objective, which inspires them for free. Cards that boost their wizard level temporarily, but still. It really is a good combo for them. It locks you into a holding objective playstyle, though, which when they start dying, and they will, it becomes more difficult because they're a 3-fighter warband. They're good, they're tough, but you will lose them. That's not really in doubt.
And sort of you can't forget that sort of 2 of them stay on 1 shield as well. They don't upgrade to 2. They get the ability that dodges and shields are both success, but they're not on guards. They could be pushed back, and 2 of them are range 1. And so that sort of just really limits sort of what you can do if you're trying to be aggressive with them, or sort of if Stormsire is gone, you've then got 2 level 1 wizards, and unless you've got the right upgrades on them, you've only got range 1 attacks. And that really holds them back. But all of those wizard upgrades and spells aren't just being salvaged, you can still use them at least.
They're a case of a Season 1 or 2 warband that has absolutely got a right deck. There is no question that you should take Seismic Shock with them unless you are choosing to be contrary, and it does work. They're not going to top the meta, but it's a winning combination. It will win you some games. I think we're looking at C tier along with the other technical warbands. Do you think they're D?
I think I probably was leaning D, just sort of looking at some of the things down there.
I think high D if you're putting them in D.
Yeah. Where do you think they go compared to the Wild Hunt?
I put them above the Wild Hunt.
In which case, I am happy to put them at the bottom of C, because that keeps Wild Hunt at the top of D.
Very well. And out with the old and in with the news with Domatan Stormcoven, who are definitely not the Cursebreakers 2.0, with a sleeker aesthetic and way, way better models that are much more distinct and easy to tell apart. But a fun but weird Inspire mechanic that means your defense overall is never amazing because only one of you can be on the defensive profile at a time. But they've got really good offensive profiles, both at close combat, and they've all got a nice ranged attack.
They all have 2 nice ranged attacks. They all have a range 3 and a range 2.
It's true.
And they all have a spell attack action, which I think is really sort of seeing where Curse Breakers were struggling and fixing that.
They've got some good cards in their deck. They ultimately are very similar to the Curse Breakers, and again in Nemesis there's an obvious combination with Seismic Shock. You could perhaps pair them with something else, but I just think Seismic Shock is the obvious choice. They're all wizards. Take the one that gives you spells, take the one that gives you rewards for casting spells, and it's just really rewards you for being on tokens and objectives, which synergizes with their deck. They had the same weakness. You will lose fighters, and once you've lost 2, you can't actually score most of the end round objectives, which is a big problem with Seismic Shock. But it's still worth taking, and are we looking at top of C or bottom of B here?
Yeah, I was torn on that as well. I think probably top of C, because I think there is that still, they are kind of underdogs, and sort of with spell attack actions, they're just that much harder to get off than other ones. You can't benefit from support. Free Fighter Warband, you're less likely to get it anyway. But sort of, yeah, I think it does just hold them back that little bit.
I'm okay with them being top of the C. Again, a lot of the Cs, I suspect people are going to be yelling at us because someone has mastered them and wins consistently.
I mean, I think with some of the ones in C, we're yelling at each other.
Yeah, a little bit. But they're good, that they are top of C.
Continuing on, we have the originals, and just the absolute originals of Underworlds altogether in Steelheart's Champions. So they are the first Stormcast Eternal warband. They are the original 3-fighter elite warband. And going back and looking at them, the fighter profiles hold up.
Their cards do hold up.
Yeah, they have 3 damage off the bat. You've got a 2 damage scything attack when you inspire. You've got a 3 hammer attack when inspired. They really hold up, and they can dish out the punishment. Where they then struggle, though, is their cards. They've got a couple of great ploys that just would not be made now, and because it's Nemesis, those are legal. You can have them, but you are going to be leaning heavily on whatever deck you pick, because the objectives are just rubbish. There are so many that, again, would not get made now, and for the unfun reasons. 3 glory ones, possibly, but a few third end stages, and ones with really hard things to achieve. Ones relying on having multiple of you alive, which as a 3-fighter warband is really tough. Because of the damage, Tooth and Claw is probably the way to go.
Famously, in Season 1, they were passive, hold objective, kind of hold back warband. But yeah, I think in modern Nemesis, that's not how to play them. And playing them aggressively with Tooth and Claw or Toxic Terrors is the way to go.
And they would be a good one for Toxic Terrors, because you're going to have to lean heavy on whatever deck you pick.
Yeah.
And that internal synergy will do well for them.
And you've got 2 that key off leaders, and Steelheart's a good leader. They have the problem all 3-fighter warbands have, though, in which is, even in a winning game, most of you will die. But you're not bleeding much glory with them.
Yep.
I can't place them highly. Plus, we haven't, to be fair, played with them. Who's playing with Steelheart Champions? There must be someone. I'm sorry, I'm not coming for you. But you don't see them much these days. So this is perhaps us being ignorant because we don't know what we're talking about. But I think they're D tier.
Yeah, I think D as well. I think with their just purely their fighter cards, keep them out of F.
Absolutely.
And then because they've got nothing else, it means you can really go in on other stuff.
Yeah.
Which actually helps with Toxic Terrors.
Yeah. Toxic Terrors is just such a good deck for all the Season 1 or 2 warbands in terms of giving you a choice.
I'm actually thinking surprisingly high in D.
I think so as well, actually, yeah. Just the power of their raw profiles. And a not too bad inspire mechanic that gives them that will, often trigger.
They are slow for invading, which both want. So I'm thinking here.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think they're a rare warband that's worse in Championship because they're far easier to kill. But in Nemesis, not many people can one-hit kill them. It's very rare.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Next,
we come to a very similar warband in Iron Soul.
Definitely not an update.
definitely not basically the same thing, but better, but with a more difficult Inspire mechanic. But yeah, almost everything we said for Steelheart applies to the Condemners when it comes to the fighter cards. Great profiles, horrible Inspire mechanic. It's the same as Velmorn, but worse, because only your own crits will help you.
But it's only in defense.
Is it really? I thought it was attack and defense.
Oh.
I think it's just roll a crit.
Okay.
But you've got to roll a crit. It's
Yeah.
not a guarantee. And they've got some good cards, which is the thing that they have that Steelheart don't. They've got some fun surges, and they've got a lot of just simple, effective upgrades and simple, effective ploys like Healing Potion, basically. Yeah. And a lot of them that you don't get to see in Nemesis games because the design space has kind of moved away from a lot of those universals. So they do just feel, in the same way that Domitans are kind of the better version of the Curse Breakers, like the improved version of Steelheart Champions, frankly.
Absolutely. And we've seen people running them at tournaments, which was a real surprise. Like, Iron Souls are here.
They're good.
And they place well. I think there is a real devotee of them that sort of has pioneered this. And yeah, Tooth and Claw Iron Souls, very effective. Seen them done with Void Curse Thralls as well, because they don't really suffer from the Void Curse.
Yeah.
And it means you can't knock them back, which they're all range 1, so they hate being knocked back, which is nice for them. But yeah, I think Tooth and Claw does better, but both work and both are good spaces.
I agree. I think lower B.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that.
And again, as we've just discussed, there's some people who can bring this tournaments and come in the top 5, but they know what they're doing with it. It's a strong, decent deck. It belongs in B.
Here?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. In fact, no, I'd say above Wrathborn, honestly.
Yeah. Above Purifiers, or
we don't know Purifiers that well. Leave it there. It's fine.
And then we have the Fast Riders, who are a recently updated warband, rather than having a replacement one. They got a complete refresh with a new Rivals deck, and this one sort of did a lot more of a change to them than the Sepulchral Guards did, because this changed their Inspire mechanic, which used to be being in enemy territory, either at the end of the activation phase.
Yeah, the end of the activation phase.
And now it's make a range 3 and a range 1 attack action.
Well, yeah, I think it's 2 different attack actions. I don't remember the exact wording, like 2 different profiles. Yeah. Regardless, it's a different Inspire mechanic, and it's a real shame that when they made that change, they didn't change their objectives, because their objective deck is still very much be in enemy territory, which now they don't have to Inspire is a terrible decision for a warband that has good range, good damage, and is only 3 fighters, meaning even with good Stormcast profiles, they will lose people. So it's a real annoying anti-synergy, considering they updated their Inspire mechanic and then saddled them with a truly terrible objective deck that gives them low points for being in enemy territory, and is really quite poor. Great gambits in the new deck, honestly. A lot of them are still the old gambits, but still really strong gambits, but really let down by their objectives, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And sort of, kind of because of their upgrade deck, it leads you to think Tooth and Claw, and I'm not sure I've got a better idea for them, but it's not one that I've really thought about how to make them work.
Yeah, neither of us own or run Fast Riders, so we're not the best people to ask on this. I think Tooth and Claw may be Daring Delvers because you're going into enemy territory, maybe there's an argument for Fearsome Fortress and just playing in that middle ground, or just trying to ignore their objective deck, because Fearsome Fortress will work well for them because they all have ranged attacks.
I think hearing it, Fearsome Fortress is the way to go.
Because they want to be fighting in the middle so they can bring their close combat to bear, but charging into enemy territory just feels like a way to get killed.
Yeah. And also hard to do when your movement's 3.
Yeah, well, damn, yeah. So I think we're looking at C or D tier.
I would agree. I think low C.
I think low C. I think very low C.
I think they're better than the Curse Breakers.
Sure, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
If nothing else, they've got easier and more accurate range than the Curse Breakers across the board. And I'm sure, again, there's some brilliant Fast Riders players who are winning with them, but not most and not on average. Yeah. And we haven't seen them at tournaments since they got refreshed, which I think is telling.
And even in sort of tournaments we don't go to, but when you see the results, you're not seeing Fast Riders
You are not.
going, let alone placing. So for another, definitely not just improving on one, Storm of Celestus, with Stormcast Eternals having range. Who does that remind you of? No one I know. But what you do have here is a Griffhound.
You do. Sleek, he's great. We love the pets.
We do love the pets. And Sleek is a really good one.
He's got really fun abilities, he's good.
Sort of putting his teammates on guard, sort of keeping together as a team. So like him in between 3 objectives that the Stormcast are on is a beautiful position for them. However, that would be the dream in Championship, sort of pulling back. And in Nemesis, you're going to have to pick one of the decks to go with, and probably Fearsome Fortress is the way.
Oh, I think it's definitely the way.
Hold that mid-ground, have Sleek putting you on guard, so you may not even need the guard tech in there to score, is it Earthworks?
I think it's Earthworks,
yeah. Sort of you may score that off of someone else, of your opponent's activation. Sort of, that is the way to do that. But you're further forward than you probably want it to be.
Not necessarily, but no, I agree. The synergy between Fearsome Fortress and their fighters is great. Path to Prophecy, the new one that's just been announced, we haven't got our hands on yet, but we've seen the cards of, could work because it's keyed off numbered tokens, but I think you want to stay in your own half, so it's a bit of a trap. Fearsome Fortress will give you much more bang for your buck, in my opinion. I also want to shout out these guys for being a Stormcast warband where the designers realised 3 fighters is a liability and gave them a 4th fighter that, while nowhere near as powerful as the Stormcast, just gives them another pair of hands, or in this case, paws, and just a bit more of a utility piece. So big shout out to that design space. It's great, as we'll discuss again as we round off the Stormcast. But where are we putting the Storm of Celestus before we do? Are they top of C or are they bottom of B?
Yeah, I was really torn with that. I think they might be bottom of B.
I think so as well. I'm not seeing a lot of people bringing them, but I don't think that means they're bad.
You do occasionally see them turning up.
Okay.
And but sort of much as Sleek is great, Taros is the absolute star, mainly because they're prettier, in my personal opinion.
Again, Mickey, I think you've caused a lot of people to get angry there, but that's fine, as long as you can all acknowledge that Doonclaw is the superior pet to them all.
All hail Doonclaw.
Yeah, and who was robbed of winning an award for Best Model of the Year. The best model in our hearts.
Yeah, the moral winner.
Absolutely. So Zandire's Truth Seekers are a really quite good warband. Way like at the start we talked about how the Gunning crew suffered from a deck that was so geared to their matchup with Zandire's Truth Seekers. And while they do suffer this to an extent, there are some shockingly specific and bad objectives here. It's much easier, I think, to trim those out and form a functional rivals deck. Truth and Claw, I think, is a really strong way to go with synergy with a lot of their invading objectives. They do well at being aggressive. They've got good Stormcast profiles. Yeah. It's a very valid strategy from a strong warband with a pretty good Inspire condition. It seems weird to say that when your Inspire condition is kill one of us, but you're a Stormcast 3-fighter warband with a bird for 4. You're going to lose people. It's nice to be rewarded for that, as Hexbanes will tell you.
Absolutely, yeah. Wouldn't disagree with any of that. And Tooth and Claw is the way to go. That just sort of feels the obvious fit with them. Yeah.
I wouldn't take Toxic Terrors because I think it doesn't synergize as well with the cards you do want to take from their deck, because there are some.
I think it also leans more on the leader, which this is one where you kind of want to be, actually, no, I really don't mind if my leader goes. And actually, if my leader is one of the early ones to die, as long as someone else has taken some damage.
Yeah.
Great.
Doraz is better than the leader, and Luxia Stormrider is never to be underestimated.
Stormrider is the MVP.
She's so good. Yeah, no.
That's who you want left at the end, just shooting people.
And she normally is, just because she hangs back more than the other two, who just get right in there. They're good. I think you've got limited options with them, though, but we're talking mid-B.
I think I'd be going high B.
I'm fine with that, honestly, yeah.
There's a level of, I think they are more reliant. I think Rippers can outdamage them, but they will get a more reliable damage level. They've got better accuracy.
All right, yeah, stick on top of B for now. I'm down for this.
Which is bizarre for Stormcast, but Rippers do not want to
Rippers
let go.
are firmly clamping their jaws on. They don't want to relinquish their position.
There we
But
go.
yeah, the bird went for their eyes.
And now we are jumping right back to Shadespire again, Season 1, and the Chosen Axes.
I love the Chosen Axes.
Oh, yeah.
I love them like you might love a particularly kind of annoying, misshapen dog. Where
One of the ones we just heard barking in the background, possibly.
I mean, you can't insult dogs on the stream. But, I mean, we've got Hexbane's Hunters with their wonderful dogs.
Yeah.
We're a pro dog, just not dogs barking in the background, maybe.
Yeah.
Chosen Axes, who are rumoured to be getting a refresh soon, but we were discussing their original version. So let's talk about the positive first. Their attack damage is brilliant. When they're inspired, they have four damage and two three damage fighters. Even uninspired, you start off with 3. Just really good damage profiles. And we discussed how good that is in Nemesis. That alone, I think, is keeping them out of F.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
that pretty much ends the positives. Fundamentally, they are 2 movement going up to 3. That is horrendously slow for a warband that, for all their damage, is range 1. But the real kicker, even more than their terrible speed, which is a problem, is their inspire condition. They have to hold an objective, which means you have fighters that really want to be getting to grips with the enemy that have to stop and hold objectives, meaning you're being pulled in 2 directions. Are you a hold objective warband with the best damage profiles you can get, or are you an aggro warband? And considering they get better damage, better accuracy, and better health from inspiring, you have to inspire them. So you're just being pulled all over the place. If/when they get their change, I'm hoping they just move to flat 3 movement, inspired and uninspired, because they're still dwarves, got short legs, and maybe a different inspire condition that doesn't pull you in different directions. That's my wish list.
I think you might get either or. I think losing both is losing too much of the core identity of who they were for its faults. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be better for them to lose both, but I don't think we're going to get both with that. In terms of what to do with them...
There's a clear answer, in my opinion.
They have been struggling for a while, but Void Curse Thralls came out, and yeah, that is the one, because they lose nothing from that.
Literally nothing to be lost from being Void Curse, only gain more movement shenanigans, the ability to annoy enemies and give you more faction identity. It has cards that care about tokens a little bit, which you care about tokens a little bit. Moves and pushes, help you to actually get your objectives. It gives you so many move cards. Refashion.
Not being driven back when you have range 1 attacks.
Yes, and not being driven back when you finally have taken an objective you need to inspire by holding to the end. It's the obvious combo. Much like how Curse Breakers and Seismic Shock is the obvious combo. Void Curse Axes is the way to go. It's simple as that. I've experimented with Fearsome Fortress, which is the best before that, but I'm telling you, Void Curse Axes is the way to go. However, having said that, and having tested that and really enjoyed it, it's still lost. It was a good loss, it was a respectable loss, but it was a loss.
Yeah, it lost on 14.
Which is a really high. So again, it's got legs. They're short dwarf legs, but it's got legs. But we're still looking at the lower end here. I'm going to say top of D, and that's only due to the recent release of Void Curse Thralls, giving them a massive shot in the arm.
I think it comes lower than some of our top of D ones.
All right.
Because, I'm going to defend this, Void Curse Thralls it does a lot for them, but any of those passive hold back ones, they are going to really struggle with, and they can't tackle against that, so I think that just pushes them down more. That anyone who they can get up close with. The invading aggro meta, they love, and it does wonders for them. But the people who are really holding back, it does nothing to help them with that.
And oh my goodness, do they hate being longboarded. More than anyone in the entire game. If you longboard the Chosen Axes, they will cry into their beards.
So I'm thinking either of those slots.
The lower. Let's not pretend. I love them, but they're not great.
Yeah. But I think Void Curse Thralls has catapulted them up, because I think otherwise they were in F.
They were in F, or very bottom of D, and Void Curse Thralls has been a real shot on the arm. And if you're someone who wants to give the Chosen Axes a go, try them with Void Curse Thralls, you'll be happy. Or as happy as you can be.
Jumping back to Diachasm, we have the Crimson Court, who are a spectacularly flexible warband. They perform really well at Rivals, and we had a really interesting experience recently at a tournament where they placed second, and they were paired with Fearsome Fortress. They took one card from that deck. Otherwise, it was Rivals. And I think that was an example of someone who knew what they were doing and are devoted to this warband. It was spectacular to see and really exciting. I don't think most people can expect that. I think it's generally going to be better to lean a bit more into some decks. But they are one that have a good core that sort of, you can pull a lot from what's there, and they've got good things across all of them, which is a definite point against Toxic Terrors, which you generally want to lean heavy into.
Yeah, they've got good stuff in all their decks. They had that flex problem of their decks being a bit all over the place, which can be good and bad. In an experienced player who knows what they're doing, it lets you be responsive to your opponent. If they're more aggressive than you, you play cagey defensive. If they're playing a passive game, you become the aggressor. That's the advantage of flex. The disadvantage of flex is you're never going to beat someone on what they're a specialist at. And if you build your deck to be generalist, you do stand to be destroyed by a specialist. And they are really flexible on what deck you can take. I, this weekend, have played around with different versions of them. The aggressive Toxic Terrors, which I can't really recommend. The hold objective Seismic Shock, which I'll come back to in a moment.
Don't come back to it. I think that was really good.
No, I mean, I'll talk about it in a second. Void Curse, which I really enjoyed. They could definitely do Daring Delvers as well. I think you could do Fearsome Fortress. They're good with a lot of Rivals decks. Just most of them give them a direction that they'll go in. They will probably still not be as good as that direction as a specialist in that direction in most cases, which is why my pitches are probably Void Curse Thralls, because it's such a weird and unique design space that means you aren't forced to care about invading or defending. It lets you be flexible on where you are, which I think is really good for responding to your opponent. The fact that you don't care about being in a particular board position is brilliant, and Void Cursing can really ruin some people's day and make them easier for you to hit. And Seismic Shock. Again, I keep saying don't take it in the 4-fighter warband and then saying, oh, but this one can do it. But here you've got two wizards. They're not good wizards, they're level 1. But if one of them dies, you are the only warband, apart from those two Stormcast and our next warband, that has multiple wizards.
That's a backup.
Yeah, if one of them dies, you can still score some of the objectives that require you to have wizards. It's worth playing around with. I don't think it's their best pairing, but it's definitely worth a play.
Yeah, it's a fun pairing.
It's a fun pairing. Maybe not one to bring to a championship, but maybe you've practiced and think you can do it, and I respect you for that.
Absolutely. Are we thinking B tier?
I'm thinking B, not high B, because they are a technical challenge. The hunger mechanic is annoying to deal with. Sometimes, as well, you can't control it, because you need to get a kill from adjacent enemy or draw one of their 2 faction cards that can, in turn 1, get you to inspire if you want to. So the hunger can be hard to manage, even with a skilled player, and that's a big part of the challenge. A lot of their objectives as well will key off them being inspired or bloodthirsty. So I think that really stymies them and keeps them in the lower sections of B.
I'm kind of looking between Myaris and Hrothgorn.
Yeah, about there. I'd put them below the Condemners, just for ease of use, if nothing else. You'll find the Condemners easier to pilot. The Crimson Court are a highly technical warband, but also let's take a second to appreciate that they are beautiful. Duval is
stunning models.
Oh my god, Duval is so good. Yeah, such good models. That's just that. I mean, if we're doing a tier list of prettiest models, that'd be an A or S for sure.
Oh, absolutely, no question.
But now we're talking about someone who's a bit less pretty, but also a vampire, or at least their leader is, in the Exiled Dead.
Yep. They were part of Harrowdeep, although you would be forgiven for thinking they were Nevermaze, with when they were released. A 7-fighter warband, and they break the rules in all kinds of ways with the dance dynamic, and that virtually everyone move or virtually everyone attack, or Puppet Master for Markov and Regulus doing the same as their own little tandem. So you've got 2 little teams that are moving around, and it is kind of soul-destroying sometimes going against them because they just keep coming. I think they really nailed that zombie horde feel, and sort of thematically, sort of mechanics backing up thematics. I think they did that really well. It's sort of like, oh, knocked one down. but it pops back up and 2 more are pulling you down as they go, and it is death by 1,000 scratches against them if you sort of go toe to toe. They will bleed glory, but they will pull you down and they will keep coming. Downsides to all of that, however, are the bleeding loads of glory, and most often, Horde Warband, you'd think, right, let's go hold some objectives. They're beasts.
Nope.
The zombies do not understand the objectives and what they are on, so they are not doing that. They can get some fun utility out of things like Brave Root Maze, where it's be on them, not hold them. And this is why a warband where it's really important to read your cards and understand the difference of being on an objective and holding one, sort of being on a hazard hex or feature token, sort of the room they've got in that space. But this is one where Beastbound Assault is your friend.
Yep.
Sort of, you already have 5 beasts, and then 2 other people. Sure, you could think Seismic Shock, but actually you've only got 2 fighters that can hold objectives.
It's a trap. You literally can't score most Seismic Shock objectives. If you think it's the right move, it's not, because your zombies cannot hold objectives. They are honestly the worst choice for Seismic Shock. In fact, it's literally impossible for them to score some of its objectives, even before they lose their wizards.
Yeah. This is something that Beastbound Assault was made for, and this means that sort of they can't hold objectives, but they can be on objectives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Beastbound Assault is just so good for them. Tooth and Claw's not bad for them either. I played Tooth and Claw with them before Beastbound Assault came out to a decent effect.
Yeah.
They suffer the same weaknesses in Nemesis and Championship, which is the Glory Bleed we discussed. If someone has a scything attack, you hate that. Because if they can kill you faster than you can pop back up, that's a problem. It's difficult, but it's possible. And they really hate assassins. Not necessarily people with the assassin keyword. I'm talking people who are fast, who have speed, who have reach, who can get around the Horde and kill Dane Talos.
So Clawpack are an obvious example of that, but Soul Raider another one as well.
Yeah, if you are really good at getting to a single fighter and killing them, if you kill Dane Talos, it's not even funny how fast they crumble, because they can't bring themselves back anymore, they can't do mass movement and mass attacks anymore, and suddenly you realise just how weak an individual zombie is, and they are individually terrible.
Yeah. They are one where, just where we did mention Tooth and Claw, would just sort of remind you with these ones, a whole bunch of those you are going to struggle to get Savage.
Yeah.
Because they don't charge, sort of they are moving as a group.
And they're attacking as a group. It's true.
Yeah, they can charge, but it's not the optimal way to use them.
Yeah, but Beastbound Assault is so good for them that I wouldn't really suggest Tooth and Claw. Yeah. Where are we putting them? B tier?
I'm high B or bottom of A.
I think B more than A, because they have bad matchups. They do. There are matchups where if you've got someone with lots of scything, or like you mentioned, the Soul Raid, you don't want to take them on.
Yeah.
It's just grim. Obviously they have good matchup as well, but I think they're in B.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think that, again, I really love them and sort of enjoy them.
I'd stick them around Mad Mob Arena. That's where I'd put them.
That's where I was thinking, so yeah. Having accepted they weren't A, that's where I'd drop down to.
They're a very fun warband, though, I will say, and they're just, as you said, they break the rules. They're so different to everything else in the game.
Yeah.
The Headsman's Curse next, one of our other new warbands, the first ghost for a long time. And they've got a really interesting identity around execution mechanic, which has both positives and negatives. They've got a deck really based around locking fighters down so they can't run away, pulling them in, pushing your fighters up to them, and then in comes the Executioner with their incredibly damaging attack, lots of ways to get support to guarantee the kill, and Nemesis, as we discussed, those attacks are more valuable because they're rarer. There are fewer damage upgrades, so that is not to be underestimated. However, they're a warband built almost entirely around their leader. They do have the Bearer of the Block who can take over a little bit and do good damage, but this is the sword show, because the sword's actually the leader. It's the inanimate carbon rod that's in charge of the warband, and if you can lock them down, say with Toxic Terrors, as Mickey did recently.
Yep, freezing Venom that leader, and sort of you are ruining their day and virtually taking it out for round one.
And if you can ignore or lock the leader down, you can pick them apart because they are so reliant on the leader to do their bidding. And it's quite hard to get more than one or two swings. A lot of your turns will be spent setting up for that one big attack.
Yeah.
So I think, they're okay. I'm not blown away by them.
I feel like low B is where they are.
I think maybe high C. I'm surprised when I say it, but looking at the ones in B and C, maybe I'm underestimating them. But
I feel like you're underestimating them. Sort of, I would take them over Lady Harrows.
Wow, really? Okay, fair enough. No, we'll put them in B. I'm willing to concede. But what are we pairing them with? I think Tooth and Claw is where I would suggest because it enhances their accuracy, and you really need that big attack to hit the enemy. You really need it to hit. More accuracy is good.
I would actually say Toxic Terrors.
Ooh.
Because, more accuracy is good, but you have stuff with those poisons that sort of helps lock people down and keep them in place, reduces their defense, which can be better than improving your accuracy because you should be getting supports on there anyway, so you've got that stuff to help your accuracy.
I disagree, but go on.
But I think sort of if you can take someone from 2 block down to 1 dodge and give yourself ensnare against them.
My argument against that is so many of their ploys are they lock the enemy down, give you bonus support. Their ploy deck is already doing a lot of that lifting. And if you're taking Toxic Terrors, you're diluting their ploys and diluting their upgrades, which again, most of their upgrades are also doing the same thing of locking enemies in place. They can't move and they're adjacent and all sorts of effects, which is why I don't think Toxic Terrors is the way to go, because you have to lean into their faction deck. And that's why I think Tooth and Claw might be better.
We'll have to do some experimenting with both.
Clearly. But it feels like it was time to move on. Oh, Mickey.
It is the Starblood Stalkers, who are my first love of sort of underworlds. Because they're not the first one I played with and sort of the ones that I saw that got me in, but they also I saw them was like, yes, I love these little skinks. So when they came out, they were beautiful and stunning, and they still are. Kixitaka and Huanchi are still beautiful and stunning, but Clacktrock and Otterpat and some of the other skinks have been left in the dust a little bit with the Seraph Online refresh. And sort of Saurus Warriors are now better. But for a while, Clacktrock was the best Saurus Warrior for how they looked. None of that has anything to do with how they played, but is all still true and an absolute fact, and not opinion at all. The Starblood Stalkers I have taken to events in Championship and had a wonderful time with them. They really suffer in Nemesis for not having the deck that goes with them. They are a hold objective warband, and they are squishy. A lot of their deck encourages you towards going into enemy territory, but that's not how I play them in Championship, and I think it puts them at really high risk of bleeding a lot of glory and not actually managing to hold those things. So it looks like there's a good synergy with Daring Delvers, but I think that's a way to get a lot of dead skinks and not really raise your sort of explore count that high with them. I think they had been doing best with Fearsome Fortress. Sort of it puts you in the middle and sort of it was the way to go. But I'm really excited to see them with Paths to Prophecy. And they are the warband that I am most excited about with that coming out to sort of see like, right, okay, can they make this work? Because they have the jumping around things, so the holding back. Kixitaka with the ability to flip them can do some interesting stuff as well. Like Kixitaka has that action that I think people forget about, or flipping a token, or just doing a random damage. Like they are good at ping, which is a point for Daring Delvers, no question. But yeah, that's what I'm really excited to see them. And we don't have the deck yet, so we don't know how that does. But yeah, I think that might breathe life into them in Nemesis in a way that they have been struggling.
I think they're the only warband that on a reader Path to Power I immediately like. That's the one for them. They can, if anyone can make this work, because it's a very confused deck, Path to Power, that I think was built more for Championship than for Nemesis and Rivals. but they're the one I think that can really actually make it sing. Because it means you don't have to get them killed by being too aggressive with them. And there are some great upgrades in there that they'll be able to really abuse, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
They're a lovely warband, and it's difficult to place them because until Past Prophecy, despite being a great warband, there was no great pair for them. They have a poison card, but it's not very good, and I don't think they actually do well with Toxic Terrors because they're a hold objective warband.
Yeah.
That's their Inspire condition. So I don't think it was a good call. But we haven't seen the new one, so I think
we have to rate it without Paths to Power.
I agree. I'm glad you're saying that. I think they're in C or D, but I suspect they might be, if we were to do this again, rocketing up there.
Yeah, I think they're probably around the mid-D mark.
Let's put them in.
Sort of stuff isn't working for them at the moment.
But we're all looking forward.
They do have a decent warband.
Yeah, Clacktalk is good as well. He's a good...
Yeah.
He's such a fun piece in a warband that is otherwise not aggressive, to have one fighter that's genuinely scary to hurt the enemy or distract them while your skinks do the actual work.
Yeah.
I think also they suffered from one mechanic they had was giving enemies move tokens, which before the changes to movement in Gnarlwood was much more effective at shutting them down. And while not useless now, is nowhere near as powerful as it once was.
Yeah, Otterpaddle has been nerfed massively by that, and that's what that poison does as well. So
yeah.
There's another sort of Otterpaddle thing, and yeah, that's just been taken away from them.
But we're hopeful that the Starblood Revival will come soon for other Seraphon enjoyers. But next we have, going back in time, the Thorns of the Briar Queen. Right back to the second season with Nightvault. And the Thorns of the Briar Queen are, I think they're still good. They're a flex warband, but they're a flex warband that kind of makes it work, despite all the problems of flex warbands of Jack of all trades, Master of none, despite the problems of Season 1 and 2 warbands of having a very limited card pool to pull from.
Particularly those objectives.
Yeah, they've got, again, one or two good surges, and that's kind of it. But they've got such fun mechanics and good profiles that you can do great stuff with them, in my opinion.
And they look beautiful as well.
Yeah.
Like, this is the first warband that I ever saw knowing that this was an Underworlds warband. It's like, oh, pretty.
Yeah, they're lovely ghosts. The best chain rasps you could hope for. And they're one of those warbands like the Crimson Court earlier where there's loads of potential pairings. You can run them with Daring Delvers, you can run them with Tooth and Claw, you can run with Fearsome Fortress, you can run Toxic Queen, which you should always hum to the tune of Dancing Queen. Some people have said you could run them with Seismic Shock. I guess you could. I think it's a bit of a waste to hide at the back, but they've got the numbers to take objectives, to be fair.
Yeah, and then sort of, you could save Briar Queen for sort of round 3, but it's sort of like you probably more naturally want her going forwards and sort of on the attack. But yes, all of them you could make work, and I think some you're going to have a much better time with. I think Toxic Queen is the way to go. I think that's sort of the most fun one. But none of them are bad. And yeah, you have that real flexibility. If you sit down opposite someone and they brought Briar Queen, there is a real sort of like, with what? Because yeah, there are some of the others where it's, I bought this, yeah, I know who you've got.
Having said all that, a really great and effusive praise for this warband. They do suffer from being an older warband. Like, they're not top tier. They're not. We love them. They're not top tier. They've got one or two cards that are hilariously broken that you don't get these days, like switching off Inspiration, which can be brutal in some matchups, like the Domitan Stormcoven, or the spell that knocks every enemy off their objectives, which is brutal in the Seismic Shock match. And again, Domitan Stormcoven and the Cursebreakers don't want to deal with these guys. They were made to ruin your day.
Wants to deal with them much either.
I think Ethelyn might be able to deal with them, but fair, yeah.
But I think they annoy Ethelyn more than a lot of people do.
Yeah, no, but those are their good matchups. Sadly, they definitely will struggle in other matchups. I think we're looking at B or C.
I agree.
Top of C, I think, frankly.
Yeah, I've definitely been going into B with them. I've probably been putting them above the other Nighthawks.
All right. No, we'll do it. I'm not so sure about this one. You do it, Nicky.
You couldn't quite bring yourself to put it up there.
I'm not 100% sure, but we're not going to agree fully on everything, of course. And next we come back to the Night Vault.
Yep, still in Night Vault with Thundrix Profiteers. So the other Dwarf Warband with 2 move, inspiring to 3 move, still getting their health inspiration, but going in a very, very different direction to the Fire Squires because they all have guns.
Every one of them is packing a range 3 attack.
Yeah, and so that means your movement really isn't hindering you as much because even with a move of 2, you have a threat range of 5.
And one of them bought a balloon and has a movement of 4, which is pretty speedy, actually, particularly for a dwarf. So they don't have the speed weakness that the Chosen Axes do because they've got the guns, they've got the balloon if they need to quickly nab a token or grab a rogue fighter.
Yeah, and so it just gives them so much more flexibility. Back in the Night Vault era, they are ones that sort of would have been hiding at the back, and Rivals decks don't let you do that. So sort of this has forced Thundrix Profiteers to sort of come to the midboard much more, generally with Fearsome Fortress. That has been sort of the pairing that I've seen them coming with, and I don't really know what else you would want to bring with them. Paths to Prophecy is a sort of like, could that work? But I'm not grokking it yet.
I think the issue, and I actually did sit down and try and make one Paths to Prophecy for them, is they had that Season 1-2 problem of they don't have a complete Rivals deck. The card pool you're pulling from is very small and mostly not that good. So you have to lean heavily into whatever you pair them with. And Paths to Prophecy has a lot of anti-synergy in its cards. And they, having said their speed isn't a weakness, actually, Paths to Prophecy, they're not fast enough or have enough token manipulation shenanigans to really unlock that deck, which is a real shame. So in Nemesis, I think you're better off still with Fearsome Fortress.
Gives you the push tech.
In Championship, I think they'd be a lot better than wherever we're about to put them because they can actually play a really nice defensive, hold objective game, and there's some lovely cards in Paths to Prophecy that they can really abuse for accuracy and do great with. But we're not talking about Championship, we're talking about Nemesis. Yeah. And Fearsome Fortress feels like the way to go. Their range is good, their profiles are good, but they're not stellar, and you have to go heavy on Fearsome Fortress, which is putting them in harm's way a bit more than they would frankly prefer. So I think we're looking at a strong C tier.
Exactly where I was. I thought you were about to say D because I've
no, they're not D.
In higher, but yeah, no, C tier.
They win games. Yeah. Where are you thinking?
I think possibly high C. Looking at who else is there.
Under Domitans?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely.
Okay.
Still in Night Vault with Ulthari's Guardians, the only real Sylvaneth warband. Sorry, Kanothi, you're not trees. You're not trees in the game, which is increasingly criminal. I demand more Sylvaneth warbands. I love Sylvaneth models. There's so many lovely models that range that we don't have in Underworlds, and I think there's some fun mechanics to be had there. But for now, we have to be content with Ulthari's Guardians, which is difficult because they're not very good.
And yeah, they have a real struggle of they were designed for Championship, and it really shows. So their Inspire mechanic, it is only possible to inspire 2 of them with their cards because they need to heal. And unless you have a Rivals deck that has some heal in it, only 2 of them can heal. Only 2 of them can inspire at most, and they do get stuff from inspiring.
Yeah,
it does help them. So there's then a lean into Tooth from Claw, because you have Savage Season, which is a mass heal, inspire all of them, and we've seen that do well. At a Rivals tournament, they won with Tooth and Claw.
I think the player probably played very well, and I think they probably got lucky on matchups. Not to be mean to that person.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't think you don't take them and expect to win. It was a real sort of left of field, but sort of it doesn't necessarily tie in well with other things that they're doing because they do feel more of a passive hold back, let people come to you. Stick Gallagher, one of the best tanks in the game, at the front.
Yeah, he is the exception to they're otherwise a very flimsy warband, frankly. He is the opposite of flimsy. He is an amazing tank. The rest of them are quite easy to kill and don't want to play too aggressively. Scathiel does want to play aggressively, but they're a glass cannon. They'll die. That's okay. You can lose one, and that's the one to lose. Yeah. He's got good damage, but Tooth and Claw doesn't feel right for them. Fearsome Fortress might do better because it's a more defensive being on tokens that they like.
Seismic Shock has the same weakness as there's only one wizard, and there's only 4 of them, and sometimes you need to hold 3.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think Seismic Shock is worth considering if you really want to take them, but it doesn't give you heals. If you lose your wizard or 2 fighters, you're up in a real troubled place, and it's quite easy for them to die. I don't think Seismic Shock is the deck that's going to bring them back into the top, sadly, or at least not in Nemesis. I'm sorry, Sylvaneth Enjoyers. I share your pain. I want more Sylvaneth Warbands to, really let our trees shine and show everyone the power of, trees.
Inspiring message, Ashley.
Thank you.
So my mind would be jumping to F if it wasn't for the fact that means I have to put them below Grincrax and the Godsworn Hunt.
I was thinking low day.
I think just above the Godsworn Hunt.
Yeah. And also someone did manage to win a Rivals event with them in Tooth and Claw, suggesting, there's some potential there. Yeah. Galligan is also just great. He's a really good fighter. I have no complaints about Galligan.
True.
Amazing defense, good health, good attack.
I think it is that sort of similar space to Iron Skull's boys.
Where you've got a good fighter, but the others let them down a bit. Whereas I think they're not as bad as the Iron Skull's boys. They're just flimsy and hard to find a niche for.
Yeah.
Where is the issue there.
But following on, the natural enemies of the Sylvaneth, we have the only Nurgle warband, the Wormspats. So the Wormspat are another 3-fighter elite warband. They have fantastic defensive profiles, particularly when they inspire, because they've also got the damage reduction just innate in that even if a hit gets through, they might damage it down further. And for Golgok and Sepsimus, that could be reducing damage by 2 if they get lucky. When it goes off, that's great. Doesn't often go off, but when it does, it's great. And they are hideous models in the best possible way that you want from Nurgle. The attention to detail on swords and pustules and all of that is amazing. And so you can do a really beautiful, ugly job on them, which is great. It is just such a shame that, they are a Beastgrave warband and they do have a Rivals deck for themselves. But it has no internal synergy. It has some things in it that, even for themselves, it's how are you meant to do this? A 3-fighter warband having a hold 3 objective is tough and just not really worth taking. And they don't have much good in there. Their cycle ploys are nice, sort of you've got some good stuff there. You've got some good upgrades, but you don't have a solid deck at all, and your objectives are all over the place with a lot that you just need to throw out. For their defensive elements, you could try Fearsome Fortress and sort of go with that as a sort of like you're holding in the centre, you've got a bit of range, or you can sort of lean into that Nurgle feeling and go with Toxic Terrors.
I like Toxic Terrors for them because the cycle ploys can be used to score Deluge of Toxins as well as the poisons. Whatever you take, you're leaning in heavily too. As Mickey said, their deck is pretty poor. So despite being a Beastgrave warband, they're more like a Season 1-2 in that you have to go really heavy on whatever you go for. Fearsome Fortress works okay. Toxic Terrors I think is good. There might be a case for Void Curse Thralls to give them bonus movement. It's not been tested yet.
But you're then going against, if they inspire, Golgok and Septimus won't be getting as much damage reduction.
That's a very good point. Perhaps you have to remove Void Curse Thralls from it because you're going against what they're good at.
And Fecula, who wouldn't mind that because she's not losing anything in her offence, loses her range for the attack.
Yeah, you're right. So they're quite hard to find a deck for. I think Fearsome Fortress and Toxic Terrors are your best, but even with those, you're unlikely to set the realms on fire as you decay them around you, which is a shame. We like the Wormspat, and I think in Championship they could be a lot stronger because you're not being held back by their deck. But again, Nemesis tier list. D tier. F tier?
F.
I hate to say it, but you might be right.
Yeah, I think even Grincrax has more direction.
They're slow as well. Not quite as slow as the dwarves, but they're slow. They suffer from being long-boarded. They can really just struggle in general due to that. Yeah. I don't love to see it. I really don't, but I think that's right.
So, like, I do still think there are a couple of others who should be in that tier with them, but sort of, I honestly can't agree with them going in D.
I'm fine with this.
And then we have the Dread Pageant. Sort of moving on to Slaanesh, and the only Slaanesh warband. This is a warband that I really enjoy. I really like them, and so I'm going to be biased on these ones as well. I think they look very pretty as well. They have a really weird Inspire mechanic of just sort of wanting wounds across the table, sort of getting those, and they can injure themselves, which is a really unusual ability to have. But they can also heal themselves to undo it later on. You just need to not go too heavy, and sort of they're a fun one for trying to keep that balance. They have a really good faction deck in terms of it gives you a lot of direction. They are very much flex, sort of there's lots of different places to go with it, but there are lots of things that you can just take advantage of situations, and it doesn't push you too much in any one direction, but in a way that sort of works. They're not spectacular, and it is that sort of jack of all trades, master of none, but sort of they can be really responsive to stuff. And the place that I've had success with them is Daring Delvers, because the ping that brings helps them inspire. They've got ping themselves that they can bring along, and so sort of that can be a very fun matchup, but it can also just go horribly wrong. And sort of, I think where we spoke earlier about sort of losing to specialists, they can lose hard to specialists. But yeah, sort of, I think they are a fun place and a fun one to play with, but they're not going to do remarkable.
Unfortunately, I have nothing much to add. I have to pretty much agree with all of that. I think Daring Delvers is your best matchup. They've got so many nice tricks that you don't want to go near the Toxic Terrors because you've got nice stuff you want to keep from their ploys. You could go Fearsome Fortress or Tooth and Claw and try and play a more defensive or aggressive game, but I think Daring Delvers lets them flex more effectively in a positive way because you don't take all the exploration stuff, you ignore it. So you're not as tied to your own territory or enemy territory as you might be with Tooth and Claw or Fearsome Fortress, though they do give you the advantage of choosing a direction. Yeah. C tier?
C.
They're C, aren't they? Yeah.
Where in C?
This is a tricky one because you're very good with them, which I think biases us to make them perhaps think they're better than they are.
I would put them alongside the Cunning Crow.
Yeah, I think about there. Where again, in the hands of a skilled player, they can and will do really good work, but they're not an easy warband to get great results from in this format. You absolutely can. They're a technical challenge that I think you should enjoy, but they are a challenge.
Yeah.
Speaking of challenges,
the Eyes of the Nine. Back to Night Vault and sort of first Zinch warband. I have played against the Eyes of the Nine once, and they were trampled. They have a really cool fighter with the blue horror and the brimstone horror. Really fun, really different. Sort of, there's not a direct equivalent of that, but it costs an action to get them, and that's something where I think we're seeing old design that would be different now. You have Vortimus, sort of Zinch wizard, should be amazing, can be amazing if you get all the upgrades on him, but if you don't, he is one dodge defense until he inspires, and he needs his spell attack action to succeed to inspire, which you can't easily help him to do
until he's got upgrades on him. Yeah. Also, they've got Kacharik, who is a great glass cannon, good damage, terrible defense, will die. And you've got the two Acolytes, who are in that category of we also came. They are absolutely terrible. You stick them on objectives and hope the enemy doesn't come near them because they will die to a stiff breeze, and they rarely do any damage, let alone get kills. Sometimes Tirosh does, maybe, if he's lucky. They're really bad. Vorti can be good once you layer upgrades on him, but that requires you to actually have scored glory, which can be a challenge. I love this warband. They've got some lovely tricksy cards and teleports. They're terrible. They're terrible. They rely entirely on Vortimus, who is not that hard to kill. If you don't use him, then you're not doing anything. But by using him, you're putting him in a position where he can be attacked. It pains me, because they are a really fun warband. If you're playing a very low-powered game, you can have fun with them. But this is a Nemesis tier list, so they do have some good cards to put with your deck, and the choice is actually unquestionably Seismic Shock. Even though all the problems of Seismic Shock are here, you are relying entirely on Vortimus. If he dies, you will not be able to score most of those objectives. But fundamentally, nothing else is really going to work for you that well. If you have to take something else, you could probably do okay maybe with Fearsome Fortress and just try and turtle up, I think. But I think you'll struggle because their fighters just don't have the survivability to really pull that off. Yeah. They're really bad. They're really fun. Take Seismic Shock, and if Vortimus survives, you'll get to have some fun blasting spells, and maybe you'll score some end phases. But good luck winning. Yeah, right at the bottom, absolutely bottom tier. And I'm sorry.
We really want them to do better, and we have been begging for a good Zinch warband, because sort of everything that they could have been suddenly came to fruition.
Yeah. Unfortunately, our prayers were answered with Ephelim's Pandemonium at the start of Weird Hollow, the new Zinch warband. And it is shocking to look at the design of these two and see the changes between them and what lessons were learned and how much more effective Ephelim is. Unfortunately, how can we put this? I think you put this best earlier.
Yeah, so Zinch has heard about a thing called balance, and sort of understands how that works. So we have the very worst warband, and now we have the very best warband. So Zinch is perfectly balanced.
Yeah.
It's absolutely in the middle if you put them together. Unfortunately, that's not how Underworlds works.
It is not. Ephelim's Pandemonium are absolutely amazing. They are, frankly, a bit overtuned. Their deck is brilliant. It's an incredible Rivals deck that makes them one of those warbands that will be in Nemesis playing Rivals Plus with a few special other cards sprinkled in for flavour for the most part. They have brilliant fighters that all have a really clear role. They have good damage. They have decent accuracy. Just really easy to play, and honestly really fun to play. They're enjoyable to play as. The fighters have a clear role. You generally do quite well with them. Their main weakness is keeping Ephelim alive, which is harder in Championship where speed and damage are higher, but in Nemesis it's much easier to keep Ephelim alive, meaning in Rivals and Nemesis they are dominating the meta, absolutely, which is why we put them right at the top.
Yeah, last two tournaments we went to Ephelim won,
Yep.
and we've seen various other results from tournaments where Ephelim is winning. And they're winning with different decks as well, sort of Daring Delvers. Stu has taken them and won with. Fearsome Fortress with them, won at the last event. Seismic Shock is being taken as well. It has that big risk with it. And sort of, I think Daring Delvers is sort of the one, in my opinion. Possibly because I've been stamped on by it so many times.
I think Fearsome Fortress and Daring Delves are the right ways to go. Seismic Shock gives you those very tempting end phases, and while it has terrible surges, you can supplement it with the brilliant surges of Ephelim's Pandemonium, but you are doubling down on your weakness of keep Ephelim alive, and if they die, you lose. So I think Daring Delvers and Fearsome Fortress slightly negate that. Fundamentally, do you need those great end phases? Really? You've got good end phases in Faction. I admit they're not as good, but they're still pretty good. But having said that, you'll still do great with Seismic Shock. You'll do great with all these decks. They're a fantastic warband, a bit overtuned, probably kind of in need of a nerf. Although I'm no idea how they'll do that.
Yeah, because sort of the way that you might nerf other ones is much other than the way the Null Spirit Pack had a nerf into the change to how Spirit tokens do happen, and sort of inspiration
but
you can't do in the same way for them.
You can't. Ephelim's impact mechanic is good. It's challenging and interesting in a really fun way that I love from both sides. It's not a problem, and if you nerf that, you might make it impossible for them to actually inspire. Their problem is their cards and their fighters are just a bit too good. Yeah. They just need to have slightly weaker fighters and or slightly weaker spells. Their spells are just better than everyone else's. Bolt of Zench is the best ping card in the entire game.
everything Vortimus wishes he had.
It really is. We wanted a stronger Zench warband, but our prayers were too strong.
Yeah, our prayers were answered in the most tricksy way possible.
Yep.
I think the only thing to say about Ephelims as a detraction is if you're a new player, Ephelims are quite technical. Like, you will still do well with them, just sort of like firing forwards, but sort of to shine, and because Ephelim can shine so bright. So there's a lot of little things to remember. Stu won the tournament with them, but forgot Well of Power every single game.
It wasn't Well of Power, it was Warp Gorge.
Warp Gorge.
The fact you forget the name only proves your point more.
Yeah.
I kept remembering between games and being, I need to use that, and then I would forget. It was, and yeah, they've got so many little bitty rules, and you quickly learn the difference between attack actions and spell attack actions when playing them as well.
Yeah, they're not easy to learn, but they're not as technical as something like the Soul Raid or Canaan's Reapers. Sort of, you will still do well with them, but yeah, sort of, there's a lot going on to think about.
But let's go from the most technical to one of the least technical, and one of the most recent to the most one of the most ancient, with Garrett's Reavers from Season 1, as we close out with some Khorne. So Garrett's Reavers were one of the first two warbands, 5-fighter warband, all about killing the enemy and dying. They love to kill and they love to die. They inspire when 3 or more fighters have died, which can be theirs or the enemy. They are very much showing their age. Their fighter profiles are mostly not amazing for a 5-fighter warband, I would say. Most of their cards are quite poor. There's a couple that they wouldn't make now because they're really interesting, but on the whole, not really setting the world on fire. But the good news is, when you're kind of quite a basic aggro warband, it's very easy for us to suggest a Nemesis deck for you. Tooth and Claw. Easy as anything. And obviously Tooth and Claw has Gore Swamp, a card literally built to boost Khorne warbands. You could probably have fun winning Toxic Terrors with them as well, more than the other Khorne warbands, I would say. But I would probably still say Tooth and Claw is the way to go with them. And it does a lot for them, honestly.
Yeah.
It probably brings them a lot. They'd probably be right at the bottom of D or F without Tooth and Claw, but it gives them quite a nice shot in the arm, much in the same way it does Iron Skull's Boys. But I'd say they're better than Iron Skull's Boys, because they're not to the degree of Hexbane Hunters. They're a warband that doesn't care when you kill them to a degree.
Yeah, and can score off of it.
Yeah, I think they're in D.
I would put them right next to their core box counterparts, but just above them.
Ooh, I'd put them below. Let's put them just below, because I'd probably put them further down on my own. That's a compromised position. I'm sure some people are convinced they're weaker than this, unlike most of the ones where people are screaming that they're actually more powerful and we're underestimating them. But yeah.
I mean, it pains me putting them above the Starblood Stalkers and stuff like, and even Black Powder Buccaneers, because you've got that big tough guy, but it's like, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they've got a direction, they've got a card to support it.
Yeah, it is a real simple, pull and shoot, but the fighter cards are letting them down. In terms of Khorne point and shoot,
Season 1,
Garrett's Reavers, but armoured, and then you have Magor's Fiends. You have your 3 armoured ones, so they are hitting harder, they've got a bit more durability, and then you have Riptooth the Demon Hound, who isn't a pet.
Not a beast.
Not a beast, fully sentient, so it doesn't count for that side of things, but sort of was kind of paving the way for pets being their own models a little bit. It was sort of like a step in that direction. They are solid, simple fun of, just keep on charging. You've got some health to soak things up. You're going to die as you're going, but that's fine, because you will score off that as well.
They don't score off that, actually, but they don't mind as much as... Because as long as you're killing...
Well, I was actually thinking in my mind, because Tooth and Claw is the obvious place to go with them, but Void Cursed Thralls you could go as well, that they're not being pushed back where they've got that range 1. Riptooth doesn't like it, because it really changes Riptooth's defense, but the rest of them are fine with that. Obviously, Gertok already can't be knocked back.
I've heard it said that they're actually the original Void Curse fighter.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I think they just kind of do what Garrix do, but better.
Yeah, to be honest, which is why I think they're going in C tier.
Yeah.
There's probably decently in C tier. They are still showing their age compared to the newer aggro warbands. They are all range 1. They don't have as many fun tricks, but there's nothing wrong with simple, effective, as Khorne will tell you. Ultimately, they're an axe to the face warband, and if that's what you want, that's what you'll get. And because of that clear niche and role and support for it in Nemesis, they have probably aged the most gracefully of all the Season 1 warbands.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's always a place for that mindless aggro. I think we should put them 4th or 5th.
Yeah. I think just for that, you know what they're doing in simplicity above Dread Pageant.
Sure.
And then continuing Khorne, you may have noticed we had 1 Nurgle, 1 Slanesh, 2 Zinch. Khorne has 3.
Yeah.
And the most recent Khorne warband, only going back to Nevermaze, Drom. The Gore Chosen of Drom. This is just getting more elites. So we had 5, we had 4, now we have 3. And this is what if even tougher and more health, but also some range. So you have a range 2 with Drom. The Gore Hulk is just such a tank. And this is a warband that when you hit them, they get stronger because they are getting now, what are they called, their tokens?
Blood Tithe?
Blood Tithe, yes. Whenever you hit them or wound them, unless they're going to lethal hexes, they are getting Blood Tithe tokens, and when they get enough, they inspire, and they can spend them to do things. They'll do some stuff, or do them, give things there. So they are just really solid, and their fighter profiles carry them a lot. So Herax gets forgotten about as sort of like, oh yeah, Herax is here too, and he's sort of the weak, sort of just there one. In any other warband, Herax would be a solid, decent fighter. So like some of the warbands we've got down in D, sort of they're like, oh, they've got one good person. That would be Herax. It might be a very similar profile. A real weakness for them is their rivals deck just themselves. Their ploys, something like 7 or 8 of them are keyed to either Drom, Leader, or Priest. Drom is the only leader, Drom is the only priest.
And he's the only Drom as well.
Yeah. So it really sort of keys on Drom, and if Drom goes down, then you're losing loads of that. But in Nemesis, you can go a lot lighter on that and sort of lean in a different direction. They've actually got quite a bit that keys off of No Man's Land or being adjacent to No Man's Land, and so it's given an interesting direction for Fearsome Fortress with them, which isn't possibly what you'd think. You'd think, oh, it's Khorne again, so Tooth and Claw, right?
Having said that, you can do Tooth and Claw with them. It'll work. Fearsome Fortress will work. And we were playing around with, but never actually tested a Void Cursed Walls Drom, which may also be an effective way of doing things. Yeah. They've got potential. I think as we go through the Khorne warband through time, we see them getting a bit more nuanced, a bit more complicated, and more choice. And Gore Chosen of Drom are the thinking man's Khorne warband. They are absolutely here to wreck face, but in a more intelligent and interesting and challenging way, as opposed to the near mindless aggro of the other Khorne warbands.
I think the other thing for Void Cursed Trolls for them is the movement shenanigans.
Yeah, they love it, particularly the Gore Hulk.
Yeah. I think they are A tier.
I think they're A tier.
I think they are high A tier, possibly beating out Morgoth's.
I'm fine with that. There's not much in it, and again, this is all a bit sort of contrary. And Nemesis, you've got options with them. Interestingly, this is a Nemesis tier list. In a Rivals tier list, they'd be way lower for the reason you mentioned. And they've got pretty poor end phases, I recall, as well.
Yeah.
Good surges, bad end phases. But it's a Nemesis deck where you can, really supplement that, which is why they're so high. I think they'd probably be this place in Championship as well.
Yeah, sort of.
They're good in Championship.
Really go up there and do. Yeah. And that is all of the warbands that are currently available to be in your hands.
Yeah.
But they are not all the warbands that are currently available for sale or have been available for sale, because we have Scabbard's Play Pack.
Yes, we have seen the cards, we have pre-ordered them, but we don't have them in our hands and we have not played them yet. Some of you already have them or have played them on Vassal or online. We have not. So we're leaving them till last, and I think because we haven't played them, we're going to be freely admitting where they're going as a guess. And if we were to do this again, it's quite likely they could move up or down. But we like them.
Yeah.
They seem solid, not obviously top tier or terrible on a read. They don't read and make you think these are broken or these are terrible. They seem interesting and fun.
I think they read really well designed,
Mm.
because I would actually say that well designed warbands should probably be in sort of A to C,
Yeah.
with B being about the ideal. That's where you want things.
It's true.
Because S's are a bit much and D's just aren't always that fun.
Yeah. No, it's true. And in terms of matchup, while we haven't tested them out, there's some obvious choices because of the way their Inspire condition forces you to engage with the boards and the tokens. It feels like Fearsome Fortress will work really well for them. I think with the Rewitch shenanigans and their profiles, meaning they don't really care about being Void Cursed Thralls will work really well, help them to stay in objectives so they can corrupt territories. And also, all of them are minions apart from their leader, so there's obvious synergy with Beastbound Assault. Like, you've got nice multiple options, and in time it may become obvious that some of these are actually traps and not worth taking, and that some of them are more optimal. We haven't had time, and the community hasn't had time to experiment and learn how to use them, which is why I think we have to put them slap bang in the middle of B, because they seem good, not great to me, but I haven't tested them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So they will go just above the Crimson Court. Then.
And that's everyone. That brings us to a close. Now, I'm sure a lot of these people will disagree with. We obviously haven't got experience with every warband. Some of you may be really good with a particular one or may have no matchups we don't know. But if you're not sure about the game, this is perhaps a good starting place. And I doubt many of them are going to be more than one, maybe 2 tiers wrong if there is an actual objective list, which there isn't. There is no objective list, with the possible exception of I do think our top and bottom are about as objective as you can get.
Yeah, no, those are absolutely solid. Yeah, there will be a lot of disagreement between A and D as sort of things sort of up or down one. I'm sure like we have disagreement between ourselves here, and that will be part to do with just sort of a little bit of nostalgia, just sort of misplaced love, sort of good experiences where the dice have been hot for you, or bad experiences where you've only played against something once and it trounced you, so you're like, that's really strong, right? And it's not actually that good, it just had a good run. But yeah, sort of ultimately, these are our opinions. Sort of, we've got love for all of these warbands in different ways, and some right down at the bottom we absolutely love, and we wish they were higher. And to be honest, some of the ones right at the top, we kind of wish they were a bit lower, sort of just so that sort of like it's more fun to play them into a range of different ones. Because those S tier ones, take them against a D, no one's having a good time there. It's not fun to steamroller someone.
It isn't. Yeah, it's actually unfun because it just feels like you're giving them a bad time. The best games of Underworlds are the close games of Underworlds.
Yes. And hopefully this will be something where if you do have a few available to you and you're looking for matchups, this can help you look at someone who is that similar level. So it's sort of like, right, let's play something into each other that's similar. Or if you're someone who's experienced and you're playing against someone new to get them into the game, yeah, give them something higher up the list and sort of, yeah, give yourself a challenge to sort of make that fun for everyone. Because, yeah, we want more people playing the game.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for listening. We hope this was useful or interesting. And keep rolling those dice.